They say be careful what you wish for. My husband's mistress wanted my life so badly. My home, my marriage, my status. She envied everything I had built over 15 years. So I decided to let her have it all. The mountain of hidden debt, the second mortgage he never told me about, the impending IRS audit, and the crumbling business empire he'd maintained through lies and forgery. Sometimes the perfect revenge isn't fighting to keep what you have. It's walking away and letting someone else discover the truth you've already found. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The email arrived on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday morning. I was sitting at my kitchen island in our Boston townhouse, drinking my first cup of coffee and planning my workday. As the director of fundraising for a prominent children's hospital, my schedule was always packed with meetings and events. I'd been with the organization for 12 years, working my way up from volunteer coordinator to one of the hospital's most valuable assets. My fundraising strategies had helped build a new pediatric wing and fund breakthrough research programs. My husband, Thomas, on the other hand, had spent the past decade building what he called his business empire. A series of real estate ventures, investment partnerships, and startup companies that supposedly generated enough wealth to support our comfortable lifestyle in Beacon Hill. We had the elegant townhouse, the vacation property in Maine, the country club memberships, and the social circle full of Boston's elite. At least, that's what I thought we had. The email was from someone named Olivia Prescott. The subject line read simply, "About Thomas." I almost deleted it, assuming it was related to one of Thomas's business deals. He often had associates contact me when they couldn't reach him directly. But something made me open it. "Eleanor," it began. "You don't know me, but I've known your husband for the past 8 months. Thomas and I have been seeing each other, and he's promised to leave you after he finalizes some important business deals. He says you're cold and distant, focused only on your career while neglecting your marriage. He's told me everything about your life together, and honestly, I think I can make him happier than you ever could. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, but I thought you deserved to know that your marriage is over. He's with me in New York right now, not at the Chicago conference he told you about." Attached was a series of photos. Thomas and a strikingly beautiful woman with auburn hair at dinner in an upscale restaurant I recognized in Manhattan. The two of them kissing in Central Park, entering a luxury hotel together. The final photo showed them in what was clearly a hotel room, Thomas handing her a small jewelry box. The coffee cup slipped from my suddenly numb fingers, shattering on the Italian marble floor I'd selected during our renovation 3 years ago. The sound barely registered as I stared at the screen, reading and rereading the message. Cold and distant? Neglecting our marriage? I'd spent the past 15 years supporting Thomas's dreams, hosting dinner parties for his business associates, attending endless networking events, and rearranging my schedule whenever he needed me for some important social function. I'd put off having children because he said the timing wasn't right with his business expansion. I'd even taken a step back from a promotion opportunity last year because he said he needed me available for an important phase in his latest venture. I scrolled through the photos again, studying the woman, Olivia. She was younger than me, maybe early 30s to my 42. Designer clothes, perfectly styled hair, manicured nails. In one photo, she wore a pendant that looked eerily familiar. With shaking hands, I walked to my jewelry box and opened the compartment where I kept the pieces Thomas had given me over the years. The sapphire pendant he'd presented to me on our 10th anniversary was missing. My phone rang, startling me. It was my best friend, Rebecca. "Ellie, are you okay? You were supposed to meet me for breakfast 20 minutes ago." I looked at the clock. 8:45. I'd been staring at the email for nearly an hour. My voice cracked. "Something's happened." "I'm coming over," Rebecca said immediately. "Don't move." While waiting for Rebecca, I forwarded the email to myself, taking screenshots of everything. Then, almost automatically, I began looking for other signs. I opened our shared calendar. Thomas was indeed supposed to be at a real estate investment conference in Chicago until Friday. I checked our joint credit card account online. There were charges from the Ritz-Carlton in New York from the previous night. I went to Thomas's home, office, a space I rarely entered out of respect for his privacy. Now, that consideration seemed laughable. The desk was immaculate as always. Thomas was meticulous about keeping things organized. I sat in his expensive leather chair and stared at the locked drawer in his desk. For 15 years, I'd never once considered opening it. Now, I retrieved the spare key I knew was hidden behind the bookshelf. The drawer contained several folders, neatly labeled. Investments. Properties. Taxes. I pulled them out one by one, spreading them across the desk. As I began to read, through the documents, my confusion grew. These numbers didn't match what Thomas had always told me about our finances. According to these statements, several of his business ventures were failing. There were notices of default, demands for payment, and threatening letters from various creditors. I found a statement for a second mortgage on our home, one I had never signed for or even known about. According to the paperwork, we'd borrowed against the equity in our townhouse to the tune of $750,000 just 6 months ago. The signature on the document looked like mine, but I had never seen these papers before. Then I found a letter from the IRS, dated 2 weeks earlier, informing Thomas that our tax returns for the past 3 years were being audited due to significant discrepancies in reported income and questionable business deductions. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely continue sorting through the papers. Our perfect life, our solid financial foundation, it was all a facade. Thomas wasn't just cheating on me with a younger woman. He had been systematically lying about everything. The doorbell rang. Rebecca stood on the step, her face lined with concern, which deepened when she saw my expression. "Ellie, what happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." I wordlessly handed her my phone with Olivia's email open. Rebecca read it, her eyes widening in shock, then narrowing in anger. "That bastard!" she whispered. Then, noticing the papers spread across the coffee table where I'd moved them. "What's all this?" "Our life," I said, my voice hollow. Or rather, the truth about our life. Everything Thomas told me about our finances was a lie. We're not wealthy, Beck. We're drowning in debt. The business is failing. There's a second mortgage I never signed for. We're being audited by the IRS, and apparently, Thomas has been seeing this woman for 8 months while telling her I'm cold and career-obsessed. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. Rebecca sat beside me on the sofa, putting her arm around my shoulders. "Oh, Ellie, I'm so sorry." I leaned into her embrace for a moment, then straightened. "I need to understand exactly what I'm dealing with. This isn't just about an affair. This is about fraud, possibly identity theft if Thomas forged my signature on that mortgage. I need a lawyer and an accountant." Rebecca squeezed my hand. "My brother's firm has an excellent forensic accountant, and my divorce attorney was a shark. I'll call them both right now." As Rebecca made the calls, I continued sorting through the papers, trying to make sense of the financial disaster Thomas had created. One document caught my eye. A life insurance policy Thomas had taken out on me 3 years ago. The beneficiary was listed as Thomas, of course, but the amount was staggering, $5 million. I had no memory of undergoing the medical exam such a policy would require. I picked up my phone and dialed the insurance company. After providing my information and answering security questions, I asked about the policy. "Yes, Mrs. Blackwell? That policy is active," the representative confirmed. "It was established 3 years ago with annual premium payments of $2,500. And was there a medical exam? I asked. Let me check. Yes, you completed a medical examination on March 15th, 2020. The results were excellent, which is why we were able to offer such favorable terms despite the high coverage amount. March 15th, 2020. I searched my memory. That was when I had my annual physical at my doctor's office. Had Thomas somehow used those medical records? Or paid someone at the doctor's office to provide the information? The thought made me feel physically ill. Thank you, I said, ending the call. Rebecca returned, her expression grim but determined. Michael can see you at 1 p.m. today. That's my brother, the accountant. And Jessica Winters can meet us at her office at 4 p.m. She's the best divorce attorney in Massachusetts. I nodded, grateful for Rebecca's efficiency. There's something else, I said, showing her the life insurance policy. Thomas has a $5 million policy on me that I never knew about. Rebecca's face paled. Ellie, this is serious. More serious than just an affair or financial problems. You need to get out of here before Thomas returns. He's supposed to be in Chicago until Friday, I said. But obviously he's actually in New York with Olivia. Still, we should move quickly. Pack some essentials. You'll stay with me until we figure this out. As I packed a suitcase, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Thomas. Conference going well. Miss you. Back Friday as planned. The bye. Casual lie made something inside me snap. The shock and hurt began to crystallize into something harder, colder. For 15 years, I had been the supportive wife, the understanding partner, the woman who had put his dreams ahead of my own. And this was how he repaid that loyalty, with betrayal, lies, and possibly something even more sinister. Miss you. 2, I texted back. Everything's fine here. Let him think I was still in the dark. Let him believe I was still the trusting wife he could manipulate. It would give me time to understand the full scope of his deception and plan my next move. As Rebecca and I were leaving, the doorbell rang again. When I opened it, a courier stood there with a large envelope. Delivery for Eleanor Blackwell, he said. Signature required. I signed for the package and opened it once we were in Rebecca's car. Inside was a formal letter from Cartier, thanking me for my recent purchase, a women's Panthère watch in rose gold with diamonds, valued at $38,500. According to the receipt, enclosed, it had been purchased yesterday at their New York boutique on my credit card. He bought her a $38,000 watch? Rebecca exclaimed. With your credit card? I stared at the receipt, another piece of the puzzle falling into place. No, I said slowly. He bought himself an alibi. The watch isn't for Olivia. It's supposedly for me. A gift he purchased while at his conference in Chicago. When he comes home, he'll present it as a surprise, proof of his thoughtfulness and devotion. While charging it to your card so you're essentially buying your own gift, Rebecca added. That's beyond manipulative. It's who he's always been, I realized. I just never wanted to see it. As we drove to meet Rebecca's brother, I gazed out. The window at the Boston streets I'd called home for nearly 2 decades. Everything looked the same. The historic buildings, the busy professionals hurrying along the sidewalks, the carefully maintained parks. But nothing would ever be the same again. By the time we reached Michael's office, I had moved beyond shock to cold, clear determination. Thomas had built a house of cards and convinced me it was a castle. Now I would be the one to decide how, and when it would all come crashing down. What I didn't know yet was that Olivia's email wasn't just a confession of an affair. It was the first move in her own game to take my place. She wanted my life, my husband, my status. She thought she was delivering the blow that would drive me away so she could step into the void I left behind. I couldn't help but smile at the irony. She had no idea that the life she coveted was built on quicksand, or that Thomas was planning to use her the same way he had used me. But she would learn. Oh yes, she would learn. And I would be the one to teach her. Michael Chen's office was located in a sleek high-rise in Boston's financial district. As Rebecca's brother and one of the city's most respected forensic accountants, he had built a reputation for uncovering financial deceptions that others missed. His corner office offered a panoramic view of the harbor, but I barely noticed the scenery as I spread Thomas's financial documents across his conference table. "Mrs. Blackwell," Michael began, but I interrupted him. "Please, call me Eleanor, or Ellie. We're about to get very personal with my finances, so let's drop the formalities." He nodded with a small smile. "Ellie, then. Rebecca has given me a brief overview, but I'd like to hear from you exactly what concerns you have about your financial situation." Over the next hour, I explained everything. The discovery of Thomas's affair, the hidden documents, the second mortgage with my apparently forged signature, the tax audit notice, and the life insurance policy I'd never known about. Michael listened intently, occasionally making notes, his expression growing more serious by the minute. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled under his chin. "This is concerning," he said finally. "What you're describing isn't just poor financial management or even simple deception. There are potential criminal issues here: forgery, identity theft, insurance fraud, possibly tax fraud. Before we go any further, I want to be clear. My examination of these documents is protected under attorney-client privilege because I'll be working with your divorce attorney. But if we find evidence of crimes, you may eventually need to make decisions about whether to report those to the authorities." I nodded, the weight of it all settling on my shoulders. "I understand. Right now, I just need to know what I'm dealing with." "Then let's get started," Michael said, turning to the papers with methodical precision. For the next 2 hours, Michael carefully examined every document, occasionally asking me questions or making phone calls to verify information. The picture that emerged was far worse than I had initially feared. Thomas's real estate empire was a collapsing house of cards. He had been taking out loans to pay off other loans, creating a complex web of debt that was nearly impossible to untangle. The second mortgage on our townhouse appeared to have been used to cover margin calls on risky investments that had gone bad. His business partners were threatening legal action for misappropriation of funds. And worst of all, there was evidence that Thomas had been falsifying tax documents for years. "Based on what I'm seeing here," Michael said, gesturing to the spreadsheet he'd created, "your household debt is approximately $3.2 million, not including potential IRS penalties, which could easily add another million depending on the outcome of the audit." The room seemed to spin around me. "3.2 million?" I whispered. "How is that possible? Our townhouse is only worth $2.8 million, and that's the only major asset I knew about." "Unfortunately, it appears Thomas has been living well beyond your means for quite some time. The townhouse, the vacation property in Maine, the country club memberships, the luxury cars. None of it was actually paid for. It was all financed through increasingly desperate loans." Rebecca, who had been sitting quietly beside me, squeezed my hand. "Ellie, this isn't your fault. You couldn't have known." "I should have known," I said, the guilt washing over me. "I'm not financially naive. I manage multi-million-dollar fundraising campaigns. How did I not see this?" "Financial deception in marriages is extremely common," Michael said gently. "Even sophisticated investors and financial professionals can miss the signs when it involves a spouse they trust. Thomas deliberately kept you in the dark, going to great lengths to maintain the illusion of success." I took a deep breath, trying to process the information. "What about assets? There must be something of value in all this mess." Michael's expression grew even more somber. "That's another concerning element. On paper, there are several investment accounts and properties that should be valuable assets. But when I cross-reference the documentation, most of these investments appear to be significantly overvalued or encumbered by debt. Some of them may not exist at all beyond the paperwork." "What do you mean they don't exist?" Michael pulled out a particular folder labeled Austin Development. For example, this investment in a Texas real estate development. According to these statements, Thomas invested $500,000 in this project 2 years ago, and it's now valued at $1.2 million. But when I searched for this property development, I found no records of its existence. The company listed as the developer was dissolved 3 years ago. I stared at him in disbelief. Are you saying Thomas created fake investments? It's certainly a possibility. He may have been creating these fictitious assets to justify the lifestyle he was maintaining, to show you, or perhaps his business associates, where the money was supposedly coming from. It's also possible he was the victim of investment fraud himself. We'll need more time to determine which is the case. I thought about all the times Thomas had excitedly told me about his various business ventures, the downtown redevelopment project, the tech startup that was going to revolutionize home security, the exclusive investment fund that was only available to select clients. Had any of it been real? What about my personal assets? I asked. My salary, my retirement accounts? Are those affected? Michael looked relieved to have some good news to share. From what I can tell, your personal accounts appear to be separate and intact. Your 401k through the hospital is solely in your name, and the investment choices are conservative but solid. Your personal checking account shows no unusual activity. The main financial entanglements are the joint assets, the house, vacation property, and shared credit cards. And the credit card Thomas used to buy that watch yesterday? Michael checked his notes. That's actually your individual card, not a joint one. It's in your name, but it appears Thomas has been an authorized user for the past 10 years. Another revelation that shouldn't have surprised me, but somehow did. Thomas had always handled our credit cards, explaining that it made tracking expenses easier for tax purposes. Now I understood the real reason. It gave him access to credit in my name. So what happens now? I asked. With the IRS audit, the debts, all of it? That's where your attorney comes in, Michael said. From a financial perspective, I would recommend immediately revoking Thomas's access to your personal accounts and credit cards. We should also look into whether the signature on that second mortgage is definitively a forgery, as that could potentially help you avoid liability for that particular debt. I glanced at my watch. It was nearly time for our appointment with Jessica Winters, the divorce attorney Rebecca had recommended. I'll continue analyzing these documents, Michael assured me, gathering the papers into organized piles. By the time you meet with Jessica next week, I should have a comprehensive overview of your financial situation and some recommendations for protecting your assets. As Rebecca and I drove to the attorney's office, my mind raced with all the information Michael had shared. The shock of Thomas's affair had been eclipsed by the magnitude of his financial deception. Our entire life together had been a carefully constructed illusion. "What are you thinking?" Rebecca asked, glancing away from the road to study my expression. "I'm thinking about Olivia," I admitted. "About her email. She thinks she's won some kind of prize by stealing Thomas away from me. She has no idea what she's actually getting." "Are you going to tell her?" I considered the question. "Not yet. First, I need to understand exactly what I'm dealing with and protect myself. Then, we'll see." Jessica Winters' law office was in a beautifully restored brownstone in Back Bay. The interior was sleek and modern, with abstract art adorning the walls. Jessica herself was a striking woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked black hair and the kind of confidence that came from decades of winning cases. "Eleanor," she said, shaking my hand firmly. "Rebecca has told me a bit about your situation. I'm sorry you're going through this." "Thank you," I said, taking a seat across from her desk. "It's been enlightening. I imagine so. Betrayal usually is." Jessica opened a leather portfolio. "I understand you've already met with Michael Chen this afternoon. He's excellent. One of the few forensic accountants I trust implicitly. While he works on the financial aspects, I'd like to focus on your immediate legal concerns and begin developing a strategy. Over the next hour, I explained the situation again. The affair, the financial deception, the forged documents. Jessica listened carefully, occasionally asking pointed questions that revealed her sharp mind and extensive experience. "Based on what you've told me," she said when I'd finished, "we're looking at a complex divorce case with potential criminal implications. Massachusetts is an equitable distribution state, which means marital assets and liabilities are divided equitably, but not necessarily equally. Given the circumstances, Thomas's adultery, financial misconduct, and possible criminal behavior, we have a strong case for an unequal distribution in your favor. But if the debts outweigh the assets, what exactly would I be fighting for?" I asked. "A very insightful question," Jessica replied with an approving nod. "Many clients in your position are so focused on getting their fair share that they don't realize they might be fighting for a share of debt. In your case, our primary goal will be shielding you from Thomas's financial misdeeds, separating legitimate marital debt from debt incurred through fraud or forgery." She made a note in her portfolio. "The forged second mortgage is particularly significant. If we can prove forgery, which seems likely based on your description, we can petition to have you removed from that obligation entirely." "And the IRS audit?" Jessica's expression grew more serious. "Tax issues are always complicated in divorce. You filed jointly, which makes you potentially liable for any misrepresentations. However, there's something called innocent spouse relief. That may apply in your case, especially if Thomas prepared the returns and concealed information from you." The gravity of my situation was becoming clearer by the minute. This wasn't just about ending a marriage. It was about extricating myself from a financial and potentially legal disaster. "What about the life insurance policy?" I asked, remembering. "The $5 million policy Thomas had taken out on me without my knowledge." Jessica's eyes narrowed. "That's particularly troubling. If Thomas obtained that policy fraudulently, using your medical information without consent, that's insurance fraud. And the amount, combined with your other revelations, raises concerning questions about his intentions." A chill ran down my spine as the implication became clear. "You think he might have, that he could have been planning to—" "I think we should take every precaution," Jessica said firmly. "First, we need to contact the insurance company immediately to either cancel the policy or change the beneficiary. Second, and I don't mean to alarm you, but I believe you should not return to your home while Thomas is there. At least not until we better understand the situation." Rebecca, who had been sitting quietly beside me, spoke up. "She's staying with me for now. I have a guest house behind my main residence with its own security system." Jessica nodded approvingly. "Good. I also recommend changing all your passwords, securing your personal documents, and being extremely careful about what you say to Thomas. At this point, he doesn't know that you know about the affair or the financial issues. That gives us a strategic advantage we should maintain for as long as possible." Her advice made sense, but the reality of what she was suggesting, essentially, going into hiding from my husband of 15 years, was overwhelming. "I can't just disappear," I said. "I have my job, my responsibilities. Thomas is scheduled to return from his conference on Friday. He'll expect me to be home." "And how would you normally communicate with him while he's away?" Jessica asked. "Text. Messages mostly, sometimes a phone call in the evening. Then continue that pattern. Keep the texts brief and normal. If he calls, take the call but keep it short. You're busy with work, you're tired, whatever excuse seems natural. The goal is to buy us time to secure your position before he realizes you're aware of his deception." As our meeting concluded, Jessica handed me a list of immediate steps to take: revoking Thomas's access to my accounts, securing my personal documents, changing passwords, setting up credit monitoring, and documenting everything. "Eleanor," she said as I stood to leave, "one more thing. Based on what you've told me about Thomas and his finances, he's going to be desperate when he realizes you're divorcing him. He's facing potential financial ruin, possibly criminal charges. People in that position can become dangerous or unpredictable. Please take the security precautions seriously. Her words sent another chill through me. The man I had married, the man I thought I knew, had become a stranger, and potentially a dangerous one. As Rebecca drove us back to her house, I sat in silence, trying to process everything I'd learned. My life had completely upended in the span of a day. The husband I thought I knew was a liar, and possibly worse. The financial security I believed we had was actually a mountain of debt. The future I had planned was now a complete unknown. "You're going to get through this," Rebecca said softly, seeming to read my thoughts. "You're the strongest person I know, Ellie. And you're not alone." I nodded, grateful for her presence. Then my phone chimed with a text message. It was from Thomas. "Just finished an amazing presentation. The whole room was impressed. Got a lead on a huge new opportunity. Can't wait to tell you about it on Friday. Love you." More lies. More fabrications about his non-existent conference. I started to put the phone away without responding, then remembered Jessica's advice about maintaining normalcy. "That's wonderful. Can't wait to hear all about it. Had a busy day at work. Love you too." The words felt hollow, a script I was reciting in a play that had suddenly taken a dark turn, but I needed to keep up the act, just for a little while longer. As we pulled into Rebecca's driveway, my phone chimed again. This time, it wasn't Thomas. It was an email notification from Olivia Prescott. "I see you haven't responded to my earlier message. I understand this must be difficult for you, but I want you to know that I truly care for Thomas, and he deserves happiness after all these years of feeling neglected. He's told me how you've always prioritized your career over him, how you refused to start a family because you were too focused on your professional success. I promise I'll give him the loving home he's always wanted. I hope you can find it in your heart to let him go gracefully." I stared at the message, a strange calm settling over me. Olivia had no idea who Thomas really was or what she was walking into. She believed his lies about me, just as I had once believed his lies about everything else. For a moment, I considered responding, telling her the truth about the man she thought she was stealing from me. But then I remembered something my grandmother used to say: "Sometimes the best way to teach a lesson is to let experience do the teaching." Olivia wanted my life. She wanted my husband. She thought she was getting a successful, wealthy man and a luxurious lifestyle. What she was actually getting was $3.2 million in debt, an IRS audit, angry investors, and a man who had possibly considered murdering his wife for insurance money. Maybe, just maybe, the most perfect revenge wouldn't be fighting to keep what I had. It would be walking away and letting Olivia have exactly what she thought she wanted, until she discovered the truth for herself. As I settled into Rebecca's guest house that night, I began to formulate a plan, not just for protecting myself, legally and financially, but for ensuring that Thomas and Olivia got exactly what they deserved, each other, and the crumbling house of cards Thomas had built. Dawn broke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. After a fitful night's sleep in Rebecca's guest house, I woke with purpose, my mind focused on the tasks ahead. The initial shock had faded, replaced by a cold determination to protect myself and orchestrate the consequences Thomas and Olivia so richly deserved. I made a cup of coffee in the small kitchenette and stepped outside onto the private patio. Rebecca's property in Brookline was secluded, surrounded by mature oak trees that provided natural privacy. The guest house sat at the back of the property, a charming, converted carriage house with its own security system. It was the perfect sanctuary while I planned my next moves. My phone buzzed with a calendar alert, 9 a.m. meeting with the hospital's major donors. Despite everything happening in my personal life, I had responsibilities I couldn't ignore. The Children's Hospital relied on the fundraising campaigns I managed. People were counting on me. I texted Rebecca, who had already left for her early morning yoga class. Heading to work? Need to maintain normalcy? We'll touch base at lunch. As I dressed in one of the professional outfits I'd hastily packed, I considered how surreal it felt to be going about my normal routine while my personal life imploded. But maintaining my professional standing was more important than ever now. My career, which Thomas had dismissed as my little hospital job to Olivia, would be my financial salvation. I drove to the hospital, rehearsing in my mind how I would get through the day without anyone noticing the turmoil beneath my calm exterior. As the director of fundraising, I couldn't afford to show weakness or distraction. By 8:45, I was in my office, reviewing presentation materials for the donor meeting. My assistant, Zoe, knocked on the doorframe. "Morning, Eleanor. I brought you a latte. You mentioned yesterday you'd be needing extra caffeine for today's meeting." She set the cup on my desk with a smile. "You're a lifesaver, Zoe," I said with genuine gratitude. "Any updates I should know about before the Whitmore Foundation people arrive?" "Dr. Patel wanted me to remind you that he's hoping to discuss the new pediatric oncology equipment if there's an opening. And Mrs. Whitmore called personally to confirm she'll be attending with her grandson. Apparently, he was treated here last year and wants to thank everyone personally." I nodded, making a mental note. This was why I loved my job. The tangible impact of our fundraising efforts on children's lives. While Thomas had been building his house of cards, I'd been helping build a world-class pediatric care facility. Perfect. Let's make sure we have time for that in the agenda. And Zoe? I hesitated, then decided to give her a partial truth. I may be a bit hard to reach after hours for the next few days. I'm dealing with some personal matters. Zoe's expression turned sympathetic. "Of course, Eleanor. Anything I can help with?" "Not at the moment, but I appreciate the offer." I managed a smile. "Let's focus on making today's meeting a success." The meeting went better than I could have hoped. Mrs. Whitmore's grandson, a charming 10-year-old cancer survivor, spoke so movingly about his treatment that by the end, the foundation's entire board agreed to increase their annual donation by 25%. In the midst of my personal crisis, this professional victory felt like a small lifeline to normalcy. During my lunch break, I stepped out to make several important calls from my car, following the immediate steps Jessica had outlined. First, I called my bank to revoke Thomas's access to my personal accounts and credit cards. Then I contacted the credit bureaus to place a fraud alert on my credit report. Finally, I called the insurance company about the policy Thomas had taken out on me. That call proved more disturbing than I'd anticipated. "Mrs. Blackwell, I'm showing that your husband initiated a change to this policy just yesterday," the insurance representative said. "He requested an increase in the coverage amount to $7.5 million. The request is still pending approval." My blood ran cold. Yesterday, while Thomas was in New York with Olivia, supposedly attending a conference in Chicago, he had tried to increase my life insurance policy by another $2.5 million. "I want to cancel this policy immediately," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "I never authorized it, and I have reason to believe it may have been obtained fraudulently." "I understand, Mrs. Blackwell, but policy cancellations must be requested by the policy owner, which in this case is Mr. Thomas Blackwell." "But it's a policy on my life," I argued. "Yes, but your husband is the owner and beneficiary. He's the one who pays the premiums and controls the policy." I took a deep breath. What if I told you I believe this policy was obtained without my full knowledge or consent? That my signature may have been forged on the application? There was a pause. "That would be a serious allegation, Mrs. Blackwell. Insurance fraud is a federal offense. If you have evidence to support this claim, you should file a formal complaint with our fraud department and possibly contact law enforcement. And in the meantime, can you at least put a hold on the requested increase? I can flag the account for review, which will temporarily pause any changes. but you'll need to follow up with formal documentation from your attorney. After ending the call, I sat in my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Thomas hadn't just defrauded me financially. There was increasingly disturbing evidence that he might have had even darker intentions. I called Jessica immediately and relayed the conversation. "This is extremely concerning," she said, her voice grave. "I'm going to file an emergency petition with the court this afternoon to freeze all of Thomas's financial activities, including any insurance policies. In the meantime, do not go home, do not meet with Thomas alone, and document any communication you have with him." "He's supposed to return from his business trip tomorrow," I reminded her. "Let him return to an empty house. I don't want you anywhere near him until we have legal protections in place." "The insurance policy escalation changes things, Eleanor. This isn't just about divorce anymore. This is about your safety." After we hung up, I texted Rebecca to update her. Then I forced myself to return to the office for my afternoon meetings, the weight of Jessica's warnings heavy on my mind. By the end of the workday, I was exhausted from maintaining my professional facade while my personal life crumbled. As I drove back to Rebecca's house, my phone rang. It was an unknown number with a New York area code. My heart raced as I answered cautiously. "Hello? Is this Eleanor Blackwell?" A woman's voice, unfamiliar. "Who's asking?" "My name is Naomi Davis. Well, this is awkward, but I believe your husband Thomas has been involved with my sister, Olivia Prescott." I pulled over to the side of the road, my hands suddenly unsteady. "Go on?" "I found your contact information in Olivia's email. She doesn't know I'm calling you, but I'm worried about her, and I thought you should know some things as well." "I'm listening." Naomi sighed heavily. "Olivia told me she's been seeing a married man named Thomas who plans to leave his wife, you, for her. She thinks they're going to have this perfect life together once he finalizes some big business deals. But I've seen this pattern before. With Liv. She falls for these wealthy older men who promise her the world. And you're calling me because this time feels different, more dangerous. Thomas has convinced her to invest her savings, money from our parents' life insurance that was supposed to be for her future, into some investment opportunity he's organizing. Almost $200,000. When I tried to question it, she shut me out completely. Said I was jealous of her happiness. I closed my eyes, another piece of the puzzle falling into place. Of course, Thomas was targeting Olivia's money too. His financial house of cards required constant new investments to keep from collapsing. Thank you for telling me this, Naomi. I think there's a lot about Thomas that both you and your sister should know. That's why I'm calling. I did some digging into Thomas after Olivia mentioned his business success. I couldn't find much concrete information about his supposed real estate empire, but I did find court records of a lawsuit from 2 years ago, former investors claiming he misappropriated funds. The case was settled confidentially. My stomach tightened. Michael hadn't uncovered that yet in his financial investigation. "Have you told Olivia this?" I tried. "She accused me of trying to sabotage her happiness and hasn't spoken to me in 3 days. She's completely under his spell. But I thought you should know, both about Olivia's involvement with Thomas and about the lawsuit, in case you weren't aware." "I appreciate that more than you know," I said sincerely. "I've recently discovered that Thomas has been lying about many things, not just his fidelity." Naomi was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do?" It was a good question. Until now, I'd been focused on protecting myself legally and financially. But Naomi's call added another dimension to the situation. Olivia wasn't just the other woman. She was potentially another victim of Thomas's financial schemes. "I'm working with attorneys to address the situation," I said carefully. "If you're concerned about your sister's financial safety, I suggest you encourage her to consult with a financial advisor before investing any more money with Thomas." "She won't listen to me," Naomi said, frustration evident in her voice. "But maybe she'd listen to you." "Me? I'm the last person she'd listen to. In her mind, I'm the obstacle to her happiness with Thomas. Maybe, or maybe hearing the truth from his wife would finally break through her delusions. After ending the call with Naomi, I sat in my car, considering the implications of what she'd shared. Thomas wasn't just cheating with Olivia. He was targeting her financially, just as he had done with me and apparently other investors before us. The pattern was becoming clearer, more sinister. When I finally arrived at Rebecca's house, she was waiting on the porch, concern etched on her face. "You're late. I was getting worried." I explained about Naomi's call as we walked to the guest house. "So Thomas is scamming Olivia too?" Rebecca shook her head in disgust. "Why am I not surprised? The man's a predator. A predator who wants to increase my life insurance policy to $7.5 million, I reminded her. Rebecca's expression darkened. "Ellie, I know we've been focused on the financial and legal aspects of all this, but I'm seriously concerned about your safety. This insurance policy situation feels ominous." "Jessica's filing for emergency protections today," I assured her. "And I'm staying here, away from Thomas." "Good. But I think we need to consider additional security measures." Rebecca hesitated, then continued. "My brother-in-law Jack is a private investigator. He specializes in domestic cases, including situations involving potential threats. I'd like to bring him into this, both for protection and to gather more evidence about Thomas's activities." I nodded, suddenly feeling the weight of my vulnerability. "Make the call." 2 hours later, Jack Foster sat across from us at Rebecca's kitchen table. In his mid-40s, with prematurely silver hair and keen gray eyes, he had the quiet confidence of someone who had seen it all and knew exactly how to handle it. "Based on what you've told me," he said after listening to my story, "Thomas presents a potential threat on multiple levels: financial fraud, identity theft, possibly insurance fraud, and given the life insurance escalation, potentially worse. You think he might actually—" I couldn't bring myself to finish the sentence. "I think we need to operate under the assumption that he's dangerous," Jack said carefully. "People backed into financial corners can make desperate choices. Add in the fact that he stands to gain $7.5 million if something happens to you, and yes, I'm concerned." Rebecca squeezed my hand under the table. "So what do we do?" I asked. "First, we implement immediate security protocols," Jack replied. "You don't go anywhere alone. You vary your routes to and from work. You install a new security system here at the guest house. I can have that done tomorrow morning. You carry a personal alarm at all times." He placed a small device on the table. "Press this button, and it emits a 130 decibel alarm and automatically calls for emergency assistance." I picked up the device, small enough to fit on my keychain. The reality of my situation was sinking in deeper with each precaution. "Second," Jack continued, "we gather evidence. I'll start surveillance on Thomas when he returns from New York. We need to document his movements, his contacts, any unusual behavior. I'll also look into this lawsuit Naomi mentioned and see what else I can uncover about his business dealings." "What about Olivia?" I asked. "Should we warn her about the financial danger she's in?" Jack considered this. "It's tricky. Warning her now might alert Thomas that you know about the affair and his financial schemes. That could cause him to accelerate whatever he's planning or destroy evidence. On the other hand, she's a potential victim who might have valuable information. I think we should wait," Rebecca suggested. "At least until Jessica has the legal protections in place and Jack has started surveillance. Then we can reassess whether contacting Olivia makes strategic sense." I nodded in agreement, though part of me felt guilty about leaving Olivia in the dark. Despite her role as the other woman, she was clearly being manipulated by Thomas just as I had been. "There's one more thing," Jack said, his expression serious. "I recommend having your home searched for surveillance devices." "You think Thomas is spying on me?" The idea sent a chill down my spine. I've seen it in similar cases. Controlling partners often monitor their spouse's communications, especially when they're hiding significant secrets. It's a relatively simple sweep to perform, and it would give us peace of mind. By the end of our meeting with Jack, we had a comprehensive security and investigation plan in place. He would begin surveillance on Thomas as soon as he returned from New York. The security system in the guest house would be upgraded in the morning, and Jack would accompany me to my townhouse during the day tomorrow, while Thomas was still away, to collect essential items and check for surveillance devices. As Jack was leaving, my phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. "Missing you. Conference wrapping up tomorrow. Can't wait to see you and give you your surprise. Love you so much." The blatant lies, the fake affection, it all turned my stomach now. I showed the text to Jack. "Perfect," he said. "Keep up the pretense. Let him think everything is normal until we're ready to make our move." I nodded and typed back, "Missing you too. Have a safe trip home. Love you." Each word felt like ash in my mouth. After Jack left, Rebecca and I sat on the guest house patio with glasses of wine, the evening air cool against my skin. "How are you holding up, really?" she asked. I took a long sip before answering. "I'm still processing." Yesterday morning, I thought I had a faithful husband and financial security. Now I'm hiding at your house with a personal alarm, consulting with private investigators, and discovering my husband might actually want me dead for insurance money. It's a lot. "You're handling it with incredible strength," Rebecca said. "Most people would be falling apart." "Oh, I'm falling apart on the inside," I admitted. "But falling apart won't solve anything. I need to stay focused, stay strategic." "And what about after? When all this is resolved legally and financially? What do you want your life to look like then?" It was a question I hadn't allowed myself to consider yet. The future beyond this crisis seemed like a distant, hazy concept. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Right now I'm just trying to get through each day, each decision. But I know one thing for certain. I'm not going to let Thomas destroy everything I've worked for. And I'm not going to let him do to Olivia what he did to me, even if she thinks she wants it." Rebecca raised her glass. "To your resilience, and to karma coming for Thomas Blackwell." I clinked my glass against hers, feeling a spark of determination cutting through the fear and uncertainty. Thomas and Olivia thought they were orchestrating the perfect exit from his marriage. They had no idea that I was orchestrating something, too. A reckoning that would expose every lie, every scheme, every betrayal. Tomorrow, Thomas would return to Boston, expecting to find his convenient, unsuspecting wife waiting at home. Instead, he would find an empty house and the first signs that his carefully constructed facade was beginning to crumble. And it would only be the beginning. The next morning dawned gray and drizzly, matching my mood as I prepared to return to my townhouse. No longer home, just a place filled with lies and false memories. Jack arrived at 8:08 a.m. sharp, driving an understated dark blue sedan. "Thomas's flight is scheduled to land at 4:30 p.m., he confirmed as we pulled away from Rebecca's house. "That gives us plenty of time to search the townhouse and collect your things." I nodded, suddenly nervous about returning to the place I'd shared with Thomas for so many years. "What exactly are we looking for in terms of surveillance?" "Cameras are the most obvious concern," Jack explained, his eyes constantly scanning the road and mirrors as he drove. "They're typically hidden, in common areas, living room, kitchen, home office. Then there's audio monitoring devices, which could be anywhere. And finally, digital surveillance, keyloggers on computers, spyware on phones, that sort of thing." The thought of Thomas secretly watching or listening to me in our home made my skin crawl. How long had I been under surveillance in my own house? How many private moments had been invaded? When we arrived at the townhouse, I hesitated before inserting my key into the lock. This elegant brownstone in Beacon Hill had once represented success and stability to me. Now it felt like entering a beautiful trap. "Take your time," Jack said quietly. "I know this isn't easy." I took a deep breath and opened the door. Everything looked exactly as I'd left it 2 days earlier. The shattered coffee cup still on the patio. The financial documents still spread across the dining table where I'd abandoned them in my haste to leave with Rebecca. Jack immediately got to work, pulling out what looked like a modified smartphone with several attachments. "This detects radio frequencies, camera lenses, and certain types of electronic signals," he explained. "I'll start the sweep while you gather what you need, but don't take anything from the rooms I haven't cleared yet." I nodded and waded in the entryway while he methodically moved through the first floor. After about 20 minutes, he returned with a grim expression and 3 small devices in his hand. "Found these," he said, showing me what looked like ordinary USB wall chargers. "One in the living room, one in the kitchen, and one in your home office. They contain cameras and microphones, commercial grade, available online. They transmit to a cloud server that can be accessed remotely." I stared at the innocent-looking devices in horror. So he's been watching me? Listening to me? In my own home? Most likely. The good news is they don't appear to be particularly sophisticated. They require Wi-Fi to transmit, and they don't record locally. So once we remove them from power and your home network, they're effectively neutralized. Should we leave them in place? To avoid tipping him off that I know? Jack shook his head. Too risky. He could hear us discussing our plans if we left them active. Better to remove them and let him wonder what happened. I'll keep sweeping for others. I want to check the bedrooms and bathrooms next. I felt violated and nauseated. The bedroom Thomas and I had shared for years, the bathroom where I showered and prepared for each day, had those private spaces been under surveillance too? Jack continued his methodical search while I began gathering essential items from the cleared rooms. Important documents, irreplaceable photographs, family heirlooms. I worked quickly, filling suitcases with clothing and necessities for an extended absence. In my home office, I paused at the sight of my grandmother's antique desk. She had left it to me in her will, along with the Hamptons property that Thomas had convinced me to sell. I ran my fingers along the smooth walnut surface, remembering how she used to write letters at this desk every Sunday afternoon. I couldn't leave it behind. It was too precious, too connected to my true self rather than the facade of a life Thomas had constructed around me. "Jack," I called, "is there any way we can move this desk today? It was my grandmother's, and I can't bear the thought of leaving it here." Jack examined the desk. "We can make it happen. I'll call a moving service I trust. They can meet us here." Within the hour, they're very discreet and handle sensitive situations regularly. As Jack made the arrangements, I continued my inventory of items I couldn't bear to leave behind. The process felt both practical and deeply emotional. I was literally separating my true self from the false life I'd been living. When I reached the master bedroom after Jack cleared it, finding no additional surveillance devices, thankfully, I faced the strange task of packing up my life while leaving enough to maintain the illusion that I might return. I selected clothes, jewelry, and personal items that mattered most to me, trying to choose things Thomas might not immediately notice were missing. In my jewelry box, I found the empty spot where my grandmother's sapphire pendant should have been, the one I'd seen Olivia wearing in the photos. The theft felt even more personal now, knowing it had been deliberately taken from this very spot. As I was closing the jewelry box, something caught my eye, a false bottom I'd never noticed before. I carefully removed it to find a small thumb drive labeled simply "Insurance." My heart racing, I slipped it into my pocket without a word to Jack. I would examine it later, away from the townhouse. By noon, the movers had arrived for my grandmother's desk and a few other cherished pieces I couldn't bear to leave behind. They worked quickly and professionally, asking no questions about the unusual circumstances. While the movers loaded their truck, Jack continued his security sweep, now focusing on my electronic devices. "Your laptop definitely has monitoring software installed," he confirmed after running diagnostics. "It's capturing screenshots, logging keystrokes, and recording browsing history. And there's a secondary email forwarding rule set up to send copies of all your emails to an account I don't recognize." The invasion of privacy was breathtaking in its thoroughness. Thomas had been monitoring my every digital move, reading my emails, watching my online activities. Combined with the physical surveillance in our home, it painted a picture of obsessive control that I'd somehow never recognized. "What about my phone?" I asked, suddenly paranoid about all my communications. Jack ran similar diagnostics on my smartphone. "It's clean, surprisingly. No spyware that I can detect. He probably didn't have enough physical access to install anything without your knowledge. Phones are harder to compromise than computers unless you have the person's passcode." Small mercies, I thought grimly. "We should get you a new laptop," Jack advised. "This one is too compromised, and we should assume that any accounts you've accessed from this computer have potentially been compromised as well. We'll need to change all your passwords from a clean device." I nodded, adding "buy new laptop" to my mental list of immediate tasks. The sheer magnitude of reclaiming my privacy and security was overwhelming. As we finished packing up the essentials, my phone rang. It was Jessica Winters. "Eleanor, I have some developments to share," she said when I answered. The judge granted our emergency petition this morning. "We have a temporary restraining order freezing all joint assets, including the insurance policies. Thomas won't be able to access or modify any joint accounts, properties, or insurance policies until our hearing next week." Relief washed over me. "That's excellent news." "There's more," Jessica continued. "Michael Chen has uncovered some very concerning transactions. It appears Thomas has been systematically moving money from your joint accounts to an offshore account. In the Cayman Islands, over the past 6 months, he's transferred nearly $800,000. My stomach dropped. But that would mean he's been planning this for months. Exactly. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment affair. He's been meticulously preparing for some kind of exit strategy. And given the insurance policy escalation, I'm increasingly concerned about what that strategy might have entailed for you. The implications were chilling. Thomas hadn't just been cheating and stealing. He'd been planning something far more sinister, potentially involving my $7.5 million life insurance policy. "We've included these findings in our filing," Jessica assured me. The judge was particularly troubled by the insurance element. That's why she granted the TRO so quickly. "But Eleanor, you need to be extremely careful. Thomas is about to discover that his financial plans have been frozen. That could make him desperate." "I understand," I said, glancing at Jack, who was supervising the last of the movers. "I'm not staying at the townhouse. I've got security measures in place." Good. One more thing. The court has scheduled an initial hearing for next Wednesday. Thomas will be served with the divorce papers and financial injunction tomorrow morning. Be prepared for his reaction. After ending the call with Jessica, I updated Jack on the developments. "The timing works in our favor," he noted. "Thomas will be served tomorrow, giving us tonight to finish securing your position. He won't know you're aware of anything until the papers are in his hands." We completed the packing and security sweep by mid-afternoon. Jack had found a total of 7 surveillance devices throughout the townhouse. The 3 in the common areas, 2 in Thomas's home office, 1 in the master bedroom, and 1 hidden in a decorative item on my vanity table. The level of monitoring was deeply disturbing, suggesting an obsession with control I'd somehow never recognized in my husband. "Should we take them with us or leave them?" I asked, looking at the collection of innocuous-looking devices that had been secretly violating my privacy for who knows how long. "I've disabled them by removing them from power and Wi-Fi," Jack explained. "But I think we should leave them where Thomas can find them. Once he's been served with the divorce papers, he'll realize you know about the surveillance. Finding the disabled devices will reinforce that you're several steps ahead of him. The psychological warfare aspect made sense, but it still felt strange. To deliberately leave evidence for Thomas to find. It was a form of communication, a message. I know what you've been doing, and I'm not the naive, trusting wife you thought I was. As we prepared to leave the townhouse, I took one last look around. This elegant home had been the backdrop for countless dinner parties, quiet evenings, and what I'd believed were happy memories. Now I saw it for what it truly was, an expensive stage set for Thomas's elaborate deception. "Ready?" Jack asked quietly. I nodded, closing the door without looking back. We returned to Rebecca's guest house, where the movers had delivered my grandmother's desk and other cherished items. Rebecca had arranged for a new laptop to be delivered and was in the process of setting up enhanced security measures around the property. "Motion sensors at all entry points," she explained, showing me the security tablet. "Cameras covering the driveway and all approaches to the guest house. Direct line to the security company and police. And I've hired overnight security for the next week, just to be safe." The level of protection was both reassuring and sobering, a reminder of the potential danger Thomas represented. Once Jack had briefed Rebecca on the townhouse findings and confirmed the security setup was adequate, he prepared to leave for his next task, establishing surveillance on Thomas when his flight landed. "I'll monitor him from the airport," Jack explained. "Track his movements, see where he goes and who he contacts. With his flight landing at 4:30, he should be arriving at the townhouse around 6 p.m., assuming he doesn't make any stops. Will you be able to see his reaction when he finds the house partially empty?" I asked. Jack shook his head. "Not inside the house, unless he makes a call or leaves immediately. But I'll be watching the exterior, and I'll know if he deviates from expected patterns, like if he immediately goes searching for you instead of staying home." After Jack left, Rebecca and I set up the new laptop, methodically changing passwords. For all my accounts, email, banking, social media, everything. The process was tedious but necessary, another step in reclaiming my identity from Thomas's control. As evening approached, I found myself growing increasingly anxious about Thomas's return. Even with all the security measures and legal protections in place, the thought of him discovering my absence filled me with a strange mixture of satisfaction and dread. "What do you think he'll do?" I asked Rebecca as we prepared a simple dinner in the guest house kitchen. She considered the question carefully. "Based on everything we know about Thomas, he'll try to maintain control. First, he'll attempt to locate you, probably by calling repeatedly. When that fails, he'll reach out to friends, colleagues, anyone who might know where you are. He'll be careful not to reveal the real situation, probably claiming he's worried about you or that you've had some kind of breakdown." The assessment aligned with Thomas's pattern of manipulation and image management. "And when will he's served? With the divorce papers tomorrow?" "That's when we'll see the real Thomas," Rebecca said grimly. "The mask will slip when he realizes he's losing control of the narrative." At 6:15 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. "Just got home. Where are you? House feels empty somehow. Did you redecorate?" So he'd noticed the missing items but wasn't yet alarmed enough to panic. I showed the message to Rebecca. "Perfect," she said. "He's confused but not yet suspicious. How do you want to play this?" I considered our options. Complete silence would immediately alert him that something was wrong. A vague explanation might buy more time until he was served with the papers tomorrow. "I'm working late at the hospital," I texted back. "Emergency fundraising meeting for the new pediatric wing. Might be a very late night. Don't wait up." There. A plausible excuse that would explain my absence for at least the rest of the evening. By tomorrow morning, the divorce papers would make further explanations unnecessary. Thomas replied immediately. "Miss you. Can't wait to give you your surprise. The conference was amazing. So many new opportunities opening up. Love you. More lies, more manipulation." Even as he returned from his tryst with Olivia, he was maintaining the fiction of the devoted husband with exciting business prospects. My phone buzzed again, this time a message from Jack. Subject arrived. Home at 6:05 p.m. Conducted brief search of premises, currently making phone calls, will continue monitoring. Thomas is making calls, I told Rebecca, probably trying to figure out what's going on without alerting me to his concerns. Right on. Cue, my phone rang. Thomas. I let it go to voicemail. He tried again immediately. Again, I didn't answer. Then a text. Why aren't you answering? I have big news. Call me when you can. The false urgency, the manufactured excitement. It was all so transparent now. How had I missed these manipulation tactics for 15 years? My phone buzzed with another update from Jack. Subject made 7 calls in the past 15 minutes, now appears to be searching the house more thoroughly. Found disabled surveillance devices in the living room and kitchen, visibly agitated. So Thomas had discovered some of the disabled cameras. He now knew I was aware of the surveillance in our home. The pretense would be much harder to maintain. As if on cue, another text from Thomas. Eleanor, I know you've found the security cameras. I can explain. They were for our protection after the break-ins in the neighborhood last year. Please call me. We need to talk. The brazen lie, there had been no break-ins in our neighborhood, confirmed that Thomas would say absolutely anything to maintain control of the situation. He was improvising now, creating a fictional justification for spying on his own wife. I showed Rebecca the latest message. Should I respond? She shook her head. Radio silence is your best strategy now. He knows you've discovered the surveillance. He's trying to manage the damage. Let him stew overnight, wondering how much you know and what you're planning. Tomorrow, the divorce papers will answer those questions for him. Another update from Jack arrived. Subject continuing search of house. Found missing jewelry and clothing items. Attempting to track your phone location. Recommend turning off location services immediately. I quickly disabled location services on my phone, then put it in airplane mode for good measure. The walls. We're closing in on Thomas's deception, and we were about to see how he responded when completely cornered. As I prepared for bed in the guest house that night, I felt a strange sense of calm. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, likely attempts at manipulation, perhaps even threats. But for the first time in what I now realized had been years of subtle control and deception, I was the one holding the power. Thomas had no idea that his financial schemes had been uncovered, that his offshore accounts had been frozen, that his attempts to increase my life insurance had been blocked. He didn't know about the forensic accountant examining every transaction, the private investigator documenting his movements, the divorce attorney with emergency court orders already in place. Most importantly, he had no idea that I knew about Olivia, not just the affair, but his plan to scam her out of her inheritance just as he had scammed me and others before us. Tomorrow, the first domino would fall when Thomas was served with divorce papers. And then I would begin the process of ensuring that he and Olivia got exactly what they deserved, each other and the mountain of debt, lies, and legal troubles Thomas had accumulated. As Rebecca had said earlier, karma was coming for Thomas Blackwell. And I was going to help it along. I woke before dawn, having slept fitfully despite the security measures surrounding the guest house. The thumb drive I'd found in my jewelry box weighed heavily on my mind. I hadn't mentioned it to Jack or Rebecca yet, wanting to examine its contents privately first. With careful fingers, I inserted the drive into my new laptop. A single folder appeared, labeled Blackwell Insurance. Inside were dozens of files meticulously organized by date. I clicked on the most recent one. A video began to play, Thomas sitting in his home office, speaking directly to the camera. If you're watching this, Eleanor, then something has happened to me. This is video testament number 47, recorded June 15th. I'm leaving this record to ensure you know the truth about our finances and business affairs in case of my untimely death. My blood ran cold. Thomas appeared solemn, concerned. The picture of a devoted husband ensuring his wife would be taken care of after his death. But I now recognized the calculated performance beneath the facade. Our financial situation is stable and secure, he continued, blatantly lying. All relevant account information is contained in the spreadsheet on this drive. The life insurance policy will provide for you, and our investments should continue to generate reliable returns. I've arranged everything to make this as simple as possible for you. I stopped the video, unable to stomach any more of his performance. The insurance in the drive's label wasn't just about life insurance policies. It was Thomas's insurance against suspicion if something happened to him. Or more likely, if something happened to me. Was this his alibi? A collection of videos, establishing his devoted husband persona while secretly planning what? The timing of the most recent recording, just 3 weeks ago, aligned with the period when Michael had discovered Thomas transferring funds offshore. I copied the entire contents of the drive to the laptop, then set it aside. This was potential. Evidence I would share with Jessica and Jack. But first, I needed to prepare for the day ahead. Thomas would be served with divorce papers this morning, and I needed to be ready for the fallout. After a quick shower, I checked my phone. The airplane mode had blocked all communications overnight, but when I turned it back on, the notifications flooded in. 17 missed calls from Thomas, 23 text messages, 3 voicemails. The text messages showed his escalating concern and anger through the night. 15 p.m. Eleanor, please call me. We need to talk about what you found. 30 p.m. I'm getting worried. Where are you really? The hospital says the fundraising meeting ended hours ago. 10:45 p.m. If this is about the cameras, I can explain. They were for security purposes only. 11:20 p.m. Are you with Rebecca? I just called her house and no one answered. 12:37 a.m. Whatever you think you know, you're wrong. Come home so we can talk about this. 15 a.m. Eleanor, this is ridiculous. Are you trying to punish me for something? Just tell me what's going on. 2:46 a.m. I don't know what you think you've discovered, but I can explain everything. Don't do anything rash. 4:22 a.m. If you don't come home by morning, I'm filing a missing person report. This isn't like you. The last message had come just 30 minutes ago. 45 a.m. Final chance. Come home now and we can work this out. Otherwise, you'll force me to take more drastic measures. The thinly veiled threat sent a chill down my spine. I played the most recent voicemail. Eleanor, it's 5:30 a.m. and you still haven't come home or responded to my messages. I don't know what game you're playing, but it needs to stop now. I've been patient, I've tried to be understanding, but you're testing my limits. Whatever you think you know, whatever you think you've discovered, I assure you there's an explanation. But this childish disappearing act ends today. Come home immediately or there will be consequences. His tone was controlled, but with an undercurrent of rage I'd never heard before. This was a Thomas I didn't recognize, or perhaps the Thomas who had always been there beneath the charming facade. I forwarded the voicemail to Jessica and Jack, then texted Rebecca, who had gone to her early yoga class. Thomas escalating, threatening consequences if I don't return home. Check out the voicemail I just forwarded. Jack responded almost immediately. Received. Already in position watching your townhouse. Process server scheduled for 9:00 a.m. Stay where you are. Jessica's reply came moments later. Classic intimidation tactics. This voicemail actually helps our case. Document everything. Respond to nothing. I made a quick cup of coffee and tried to focus on work emails, determined to maintain some normalcy despite the chaos. At 8:30 a.m., Rebecca returned from yoga, her face tight with concern. I heard the voicemail, she said, giving me a quick hug. Are you okay? As okay as possible, considering my husband of 15 years is revealing himself to be someone I never really knew, I replied, attempting a light tone that fell flat. Rebecca squeezed my shoulder sympathetically. Jack called me. The process server is en route, and he's recording everything from his surveillance position. We should know soon how Thomas reacts to being served. The next hour crawled by. I tried to focus on hospital matters, sending emails about upcoming fundraising events and reviewing grant proposals, but my mind kept returning to the townhouse. What was Thomas doing? How would he react when the papers were delivered? At 9:12 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Jack. Papers served. Subject initially refused to accept, then took documents. Currently making phone calls. Appears extremely agitated. So it was done. The first public step toward ending my marriage and exposing Thomas's deception had been taken. There was no going back now. Before I could process this development, my phone rang. Thomas. I showed Rebecca the screen. Don't answer, she advised. Let him leave a message. Remember what Jessica said. Respond to nothing. I nodded and let the call go to voicemail. Almost immediately, a notification appeared. I put the phone on speaker so Rebecca could hear as well. Eleanor. Thomas's voice was ice cold, all pretense of concern gone. I've just been served with divorce papers citing fraud and marital misconduct. Is this some kind of joke? After 15 years? This is how you handle a marital disagreement? By having me served without even a conversation? And these ridiculous allegations? Financial fraud? Hidden accounts? You've clearly lost your mind. Call me back immediately so we can discuss this like rational adults before you completely destroy both our lives with these baseless accusations. Rebecca raised an eyebrow. Gaslighting 101. Make you question your own reality. Make you feel crazy for reacting to his actual behavior. I nodded, recognizing the manipulation tactic now that I was seeing Thomas clearly for the first time. He's not even acknowledging the affair or the surveillance. He's acting like I'm overreacting to some minor disagreement. Classic narcissistic response, Rebecca said. Deny, deflect, minimize. He'll try anything to regain control of the narrative. My phone buzzed again with an update from Jack. Subject made 5 calls in rapid succession after reviewing papers. First to his attorney, then to unknown numbers, now leaving residence. Following. Minutes later, another update. Subject headed to Financial District, entering Blackwell Investments headquarters. So Thomas was going to his office, likely to assess the financial damage and determine how much I'd discovered. He would soon find that his accounts were frozen, his offshore transfers flagged, his financial maneuvers exposed. Jessica called next. Eleanor, I just heard from Thomas's attorney, Richard Garrison. He's requesting an immediate meeting to clear up these unfortunate misunderstandings. I told him all communication needs to go through counsel and that our filings speak for themselves. He seemed quite taken aback by the evidence we've already gathered. So Thomas has hired representation, I noted. That was fast. Richard has been Thomas's corporate attorney for years, Jessica explained. He's good at business law but not particularly experienced in high-conflict divorce cases. This works in our favor. Also, the judge has scheduled an emergency hearing for tomorrow morning regarding the financial injunctions and restraining orders. We need to prepare you for potential testimony. We arranged to meet at Jessica's office at 2:00 p.m. After ending the call, I turned to Rebecca. It's really happening. In less than 24 hours, I'll be in court facing Thomas. And you'll be ready, Rebecca assured me. You have the truth and evidence on your side. Plus, a team of people supporting you. Throughout the morning, updates continued to arrive from Jack as he tracked Thomas's increasingly frantic movements. After discovering his accounts were frozen, Thomas had made visits to 3 different banks, his attorney's office, and was now apparently en route to the airport. Subject purchasing ticket at Logan Airport, Jack texted. Monitor showing flight to New York departing in 1 hour. New York, where Olivia was. Thomas was running to his mistress, probably to coordinate their stories or secure additional funds not covered by the financial injunction. I forwarded this information to Jessica, who responded quickly. This actually works in our favor for the hearing tomorrow. Leaving the jurisdiction immediately after being served never looks good to judges. I've notified the court that he appears to be fleeing to New York. At 1:30 p.m., Rebecca drove me to Jessica's office for our preparation meeting. We had just settled into the conference room when my phone rang with an unfamiliar New York number. Against my better judgment, I answered and put it on speaker. Eleanor? This is Olivia Prescott, the voice from my nightmares. The woman who had been sleeping with my husband, wearing my grandmother's jewelry, plotting to take over my life. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Hello, Olivia. I've been expecting your call. There was a brief silence, as if she hadn't anticipated my calm response. Thomas just arrived at my apartment in a complete state. He says you've lost your mind, that you're making wild accusations and trying to destroy him with false claims about financial fraud. He says you've frozen all his accounts and assets without warning or discussion. Her tone was a mixture of concern and condescension, the other woman trying to reason with the hysterical wife. I almost laughed at the irony. Is that what he told? You? I kept my voice level. Did he also tell you about the $3.2 million in hidden debt? The second mortgage he took out in my name with a forged signature? The IRS audit for tax fraud? The lawsuits from former investors he defrauded? Or the $800,000 he's been secretly transferring to offshore accounts? Silence. Then, you're lying. Thomas is a successful businessman. He's shown me his investment portfolio. The properties, the returns, all of it. Did he convince you to invest your inheritance with him? I asked, remembering Naomi's warning. $200,000 from your parents' life insurance? A sharp intake of breath confirmed it. How do you... He told you about that. No, Olivia. Thomas doesn't tell me anything truthful. But I have a very good forensic accountant who's been tracking all of Thomas's financial movements. Your investment is already gone. It's been transferred to an account in the Cayman Islands, along with money stolen from me and several other investors. That's not possible, she stammered, but I could hear the first note of doubt in her voice. Thomas is arranging for us to move into a beautiful condo next month. He's planning to leave you after he finalizes a major deal. We're going to get married once your divorce is settled. The delusion was almost sad in its completeness. The condo in the Back Bay area? The one with the rooftop garden and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Charles River? Yes, she said, sounding surprised. How did you know? Because he showed it to me 2 years ago, claiming he was considering it as an investment property. Then he told me it had been purchased by another buyer. Let me guess, he told you he bought it recently, that it's already in his name? He has the keys, she said defensively. He took me there last month. It's completely furnished, ready for us to move in. I sighed, genuinely feeling a twinge of pity for her. Olivia, Thomas doesn't own that condo. He's been working as a consultant for the real estate firm that manages the property. He has temporary access for showing it to potential buyers. It's a model unit that's been on the market for over a year. No, that's not... He wouldn't... She was struggling now, the perfect fantasy beginning to crack. You're just saying this because you're jealous. Because he's leaving you for me. I have no reason to lie to you, I said calmly. Thomas has been manipulating both of us. The only difference is that I've had 15 years to accumulate evidence of his deception. Check your bank accounts. See if your inheritance money is still there. Ask him for proof that he actually owns the condo. Not just keys, actual ownership documents. And while you're at it, ask him about the $7.5 million life insurance policy he took out on me without my knowledge. Jessica gave me a warning look, concerned I was revealing too much of our strategy, but I continued anyway. Olivia needed to understand the man she was harboring. Thomas isn't just a cheater, Olivia. The financial crimes are real, documented, and serious. But more concerning is the pattern. He's been systematically preparing for something involving that insurance policy. I have enough evidence that the police are now involved, so you might want to consider whether you want to be caught harboring someone who may soon be facing criminal charges. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Olivia finally spoke, her voice had lost its condescending edge. He's standing right here, insisting that I hang up, says you're manipulating me with lies. Then ask him right now to show you the deed to the condo. Ask him where your inheritance money is. Watch his reaction closely. I could hear muffled sounds as if she had covered the phone, then raised voices in the background. After a moment, Olivia came back on the line, her voice shaking. I need to look into some things. He's not answering my questions directly. That's how it starts, I said quietly. The deflection, the promises to explain later, the claims that it's all too complicated for you to understand right now. I lived with that for 15 years, Olivia. I don't hate you for the affair. I pity you because you're his next victim. More muffled sounds, then what sounded like a door slamming. He just left, Olivia said, her voice small. When I insisted on seeing documentation for the condo, he got angry. Said I was choosing to believe you over him, that it showed I didn't really love him. Classic manipulation, I said. When logic fails, appeal to emotion. Make you feel guilty for asking reasonable questions. What do I do now? She asked, sounding lost. I hadn't expected the conversation to take this turn. I'd anticipated anger, denial, maybe threats, not this vulnerable confusion. Check your financial accounts immediately, I advised. If your money is already gone, contact your bank to report the fraud. And Olivia, if Thomas returns, be careful. When cornered, he may be dangerous. I have a restraining order against him for a reason. After ending the call, I looked up to find Rebecca and Jessica staring at me with a mixture of concern and admiration. That was unexpected, Jessica said finally. I'm not sure it was strategically wise to reveal so much to her, but your instincts about her reaction were clearly correct. She's another victim, I said simply, and possibly a valuable witness if she decides to cooperate. Thomas has apparently been using the same investment scam on her that he's used on others. It's a pattern, Rebecca observed. Find a vulnerable woman, charm her, convince her to invest with him, then disappear with the money. Except with me. He took it further, I said. Marriage, joint accounts, forged signatures, life insurance. I was the long con. Jessica nodded thoughtfully. This conversation with Olivia could actually work in our favor, especially if she's willing to provide testimony about the investment scheme. It establishes a pattern of behavior beyond just marital infidelity. My phone buzzed with a text from Jack. Subject left Mistress's apartment in visible agitation, currently at a bar in a hotel across the street, drinking heavily and making calls. Thomas's world was unraveling, thread by thread. The financial schemes exposed, the offshore accounts frozen, the mistress questioning his stories. And tomorrow in court, he would face the full legal consequences of his actions. As we prepared for the hearing, reviewing evidence and practicing potential testimony, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The pain of betrayal was still there, but it was overshadowed by a growing determination. This wasn't just about ending a marriage anymore. It was about justice, protection, and perhaps even preventing Thomas from harming anyone else. The confrontation had begun, not just with Thomas, but with the illusions I had lived with for 15 years. And for the first time since discovering his betrayal, I was certain of one thing. I would emerge from this stronger than before, while Thomas would lose everything he had schemed so desperately to obtain. The morning of the court hearing arrived, with a crystalline clarity to the air that felt symbolic. as if the fog of deception in my life was finally lifting. I dressed carefully in a conservative navy suit, pearl earrings that had belonged to my mother, and minimal makeup. Jessica had advised me to project confidence and professionalism, not the image of a distraught wife seeking revenge. The judge needs to see you as a competent professional who's making reasonable requests based on documented evidence, she had explained during our preparation. Not an emotional woman acting out of jealousy or vindictiveness. Rebecca drove me to the courthouse, where Jessica was waiting on the steps. Her tailored charcoal suit and sleek briefcase exuded the quiet authority that had made her one of Boston's most formidable divorce attorneys. Thomas arrived 10 minutes ago with Richard Garrison, she informed us as we climbed the courthouse steps. He looks like he hasn't slept, and based on Jack's report, he was drinking heavily last night. Is that good for us? I asked. An unrested, possibly hungover opponent who's been making erratic decisions. Absolutely, Jessica confirmed with a slight smile. Also, I've just learned that Judge Miranda Chen will be presiding. She has zero tolerance for financial misconduct in divorce cases. As we entered the courtroom, I caught my first glimpse of Thomas in 3 days. The sight of him, the man I'd shared 15 years with, whom I'd believed I knew intimately, sent a strange jolt through me. He looked disheveled in a way I'd never seen before, his normally impeccable appearance marred by a rumpled suit and dark circles under his eyes. When he saw me, his expression flashed from surprise to rage to a calculated neutrality in the span of seconds. He leaned over to whisper something to his attorney, who nodded and began flipping through documents. Then Thomas did something unexpected. He smiled at me. A cold, confident smile that sent a chill down my spine. It was the smile of someone who believed they still held the upper hand. Ignore him, Jessica murmured, noting my reaction. He's trying to throw you off balance. It's another control tactic. We settled at our table as the bailiff called the court to order. Judge Chen, a petite woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, entered and quickly got down to business. This is an emergency hearing regarding case number 2022 DR 4587, Blackwell v. Blackwell, she stated. I've reviewed the filings from both parties. Mrs. Blackwell is seeking continuation of the temporary restraining orders freezing assets, as well as an order protecting her from potential harm by Mr. Blackwell. Mr. Blackwell is seeking to dissolve these orders, claiming they were obtained under false pretenses. We'll hear from the petitioner first. Jessica rose, her composure absolute. Your Honor, in the interest of time, I'd like to submit our evidence in blocks, beginning with the documentation of financial misconduct. We have extensive forensic accounting reports detailing Mr. Blackwell's systematic diversion of marital assets to offshore accounts, forged signatures on loan documents, and evidence of potential tax fraud currently under IRS investigation. She approached the bench with a thick binder of documents, explaining key points as Judge Chen reviewed them. The judge's expression remained impassive, but her questions were incisive, revealing a quick grasp of the complex financial maneuvers Thomas had employed. And regarding the insurance policy concerns? Judge Chen asked, looking up from the documents. Yes, Your Honor, Jessica continued. We've included documentation of a life insurance policy Mr. Blackwell took out on my client without her knowledge or consent. Most concerning is his attempt just last week to increase the coverage amount to $7.5 million, coinciding with his transfer of significant assets offshore. At this point, Thomas whispered urgently to his attorney, who stood to object. Your Honor, these allegations about the insurance policy are completely unfounded. My client obtained this policy with Mrs. Blackwell's full knowledge as part of their estate planning. The recent increase was simply an adjustment based on their improved financial position. Judge Chen looked at me directly. Mrs. Blackwell, were you aware of this policy? I stood as Jessica had prepared me to do. No, Your Honor. I discovered its existence only after finding evidence of my husband's affair and financial misconduct. I never signed any paperwork for this policy, never underwent any insurance medical exam specifically for this policy, and was completely unaware of its existence until 3 days ago. And we have documentation from the insurance company, Jessica added, showing that the medical information used for the policy was obtained from Mrs. Blackwell's annual physical records, not from a specific insurance examination. We believe Mr. Blackwell used his access to Mrs. Blackwell's medical records without her consent. The judge's expression hardened slightly as she turned to Thomas and his attorney. Mr. Garrison, this is a serious allegation. What evidence do you have that Mrs. Blackwell consented to this policy? Richard Garrison shifted uncomfortably. Your Honor, we have Mr. Blackwell's testimony that his wife was fully informed. Additionally, we contest the characterization of the offshore transfers. These were legitimate business investments that Mrs. Blackwell was simply not involved in due to her lack of business expertise. I noticed Thomas's jaw tighten at his attorney's ineffective response. This was clearly not going as he had planned. Judge Chen was unimpressed. I'll need more than Mr. Blackwell's testimony given the documented pattern of financial misrepresentation. Let's move on to the personal protection order. Mrs. Blackwell, why do you believe you need protection from your husband? Jessica nodded for me to address the court again. Your Honor, after discovering my husband's financial deceptions and infidelity, I found multiple surveillance devices in our home, cameras and microphones monitoring my movements and conversations, without my knowledge. We have documented Thomas's increasingly threatening communications since I left our home, including voicemails where he threatens consequences if I don't return immediately. I continued, careful to stick to facts rather than emotions. Additionally, the combination of the hidden surveillance, the unauthorized life insurance policy with recent increase, and the rapid transfer of assets offshore creates a pattern that my security consultant and attorney find deeply concerning for my safety. Jessica submitted the surveillance devices as evidence, along with transcripts of Thomas's voicemails and texts. As Judge Chen reviewed these materials, I noticed Thomas's confident facade beginning to crack. He was whispering furiously to his attorney, who appeared increasingly uncomfortable. Richard Garrison stood again. Your Honor, regarding the surveillance devices, my client installed these as security measures after concerns about break-ins in their neighborhood. Mrs. Blackwell is dramatically mischaracterizing normal home security practices. I couldn't help but notice he didn't address the threatening messages or the connection to the life insurance policy. Jessica was ready. Your Honor, we have the technical specifications for these devices. They are not standard home security equipment, but rather covert surveillance tools specifically marketed for discreet monitoring. Additionally, Mr. Blackwell had installed keystroke logging software on Mrs. Blackwell's computer and was forwarding copies of her emails to himself, none of which has any legitimate security purpose. The judge frowned, turning to Thomas directly for the first time. Mr. Blackwell, these are troubling allegations with substantial documentation. Do you wish to testify regarding these matters? Thomas stood, straightening his tie in a gesture I recognized as his preparation for charming an audience. Your Honor, I am deeply saddened by this entire situation. My wife has clearly been influenced by individuals who have convinced her of conspiracies that simply don't exist. The surveillance was for our protection. The offshore accounts are legitimate business investments. Life insurance is prudent financial planning. Eleanor has always been somewhat naive about financial matters, preferring to focus on her hospital work while I handled our investments. The condescension in his tone was palpable. I kept my expression neutral, but inside I was seething at the familiar way he was dismissing my intelligence and agency. And these threatening messages? Judge Chen asked, holding up the transcript. Thomas had the audacity to look wounded. Taken completely out of context, Your Honor. I was worried when my wife disappeared without explanation. My concern was interpreted as threats because someone has poisoned her against me. Judge Chen's expression made it clear she wasn't buying his explanation. Mr. Blackwell, regardless of your intent. Language such as "there will be consequences and you'll regret this" from a husband to a wife who has left the marital home is concerning, particularly in the context of these other allegations. She turned back to her notes for a moment, then looked up decisively. "I'm extending the temporary restraining orders regarding both the financial assets and personal protection for 30 days. During this time, Mr. Blackwell is to have no contact with Mrs. Blackwell except through counsel. All joint assets will remain frozen pending further investigation of these financial matters." Thomas's face flushed with anger, but Judge Chen wasn't finished. "Additionally, I'm ordering Mr. Blackwell to provide a complete accounting of all financial accounts, investments, and transactions for the past 5 years within 10 days. The life insurance policy is to remain frozen, with no changes, permitted to coverage amount or beneficiary designation, and Mr. Blackwell is ordered to remove all surveillance equipment from the marital home and provide all recordings obtained through these devices to Mrs. Blackwell's counsel." She fixed Thomas with a stern look. "Mr. Blackwell, I strongly suggest you cooperate fully with these orders. Any violations will be treated as contempt of court, which could result in significant penalties including possible incarceration. Do you understand?" Thomas nodded stiffly. His charm offensive completely failed. "Yes, Your Honor." "Then this hearing is adjourned. We'll reconvene in 30 days to review compliance and determine next steps." As we gathered our documents, I felt Thomas's gaze burning into me. When I finally looked up, the mask had completely dropped. The cold fury in his eyes confirmed what Jessica and Rebecca had been telling me. This man was not who I thought he was, and he was potentially dangerous in his desperation. Outside the courtroom, Jessica was pleased with the outcome. "Judge," Chen saw right through him. "The extended restraining orders give us time to continue our investigation, and the required financial accounting will either force Thomas to reveal his schemes or commit perjury." "What happens now?" I asked as we walked to the courthouse parking garage, Jack following at a discreet distance to ensure Thomas didn't approach me. "Now we prepare for the real battle," Jessica explained. "Thomas will try to hide assets, claim business losses, maybe even attempt to declare bankruptcy to avoid the financial consequences. But with the forensic accounting evidence we're gathering, and the court's oversight, those tactics won't work." "And Olivia?" I couldn't help asking. "What happens to her in all this?" Jessica gave me a curious look. "That's up to her. If she chooses to cooperate, her testimony about Thomas's investment schemes could be valuable. If not, she may find herself losing her inheritance and facing a harsh reality when Thomas can no longer maintain the illusion of wealth he promised her." As we reached Rebecca's car, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Olivia. We need to talk." Thomas came back last night, took the documents I had about the investment, and left. He's not answering my calls. I checked my accounts this morning. The money is gone. I showed the message to Jessica, who nodded thoughtfully. This could be significant. If she's willing to provide evidence about how Thomas convinced her to invest and then took her money, it strengthens our case substantially. "And what about Thomas?" Rebecca asked. "Where is he now?" Jack approached, having received the all-clear that Thomas had left the courthouse. "He's on the move, left in a hurry after the hearing, not even stopping to consult with his attorney. I have an associate following him." My phone rang, Jack's associate calling with an update. Jack answered, listened for a moment, then looked at me with concern. "Thomas went straight to your townhouse after the hearing. He's removing items and loading them into his car. Appears to be primarily taking electronic devices and files from his home office." "But the judge ordered him to preserve all records and devices," I said, alarmed. "Exactly," Jessica replied grimly. "He's destroying evidence. I'm calling the court right now to report this violation." While Jessica made the call, Jack received another update. "Thomas has now left the townhouse and is heading toward the financial district, likely going to his office to remove more documents." Jessica ended her call with a satisfied expression. The judge has issued an immediate order authorizing law enforcement to prevent removal of potential evidence from both your home and Thomas's office. Police are being dispatched now. The next hours were a blur of activity. Jessica coordinated with court officers and police to execute the judge's order. Jack's team maintained surveillance on Thomas, reporting his increasingly erratic movements through the city. And I remained at Rebecca's house, fielding calls from Jessica and considering Olivia's request to meet. By evening, the situation had escalated dramatically. Thomas had been caught attempting to remove financial records from his office despite the court order. When confronted by court officers, he had become belligerent, resulting in his temporary detention for contempt. "They're holding him overnight," Jessica reported during our evening call. The judge was not pleased with his blatant violation of her orders. "This works very much in our favor, Eleanor. His credibility with the court is now severely damaged." "What? About the records he was trying to remove?" I asked. "Secured as evidence. The preliminary review suggests they contain documentation of previously undisclosed accounts and investments. Michael's team is analyzing them now." After ending the call with Jessica, I finally responded to Olivia's text, suggesting we meet. The following day at a neutral location, a quiet cafe in Cambridge, far from both our usual haunts. She agreed immediately. I debated whether to tell Jessica about the planned meeting, ultimately deciding transparency with my legal team was essential. She didn't object, but advised me to have Jack nearby as security and to record the conversation, with Olivia's knowledge and consent. That night, as I prepared for bed in the guest house, my phone buzzed with a notification from a financial app I rarely used. Curious, I opened it to find an alert about unusual activity on a forgotten investment account, one I'd opened before marrying Thomas and had barely touched since. The alert indicated a login attempt using my password, but from an unrecognized device. Someone, almost certainly Thomas, was trying to access my personal financial accounts. Fortunately, the two-factor authentication had prevented the access, but the attempt itself was chilling. Even while detained for contempt, Thomas was still trying to reach any assets he could find. I immediately called Jessica's emergency line to report this new development. "He's getting desperate," she observed, "which makes him more dangerous but also more likely to make mistakes. Change all your passwords immediately, and we'll document this attempted intrusion for the court." After securing my accounts with new passwords, I sat on the guest house patio, watching the moon rise over Rebecca's garden. The Thomas I thought I knew, the charming, ambitious man I'd married, had never really existed. In his place was a desperate, cornered fraud who was willing to violate court orders, steal from his mistress, and potentially worse. Tomorrow I will meet Olivia face to face for the first time. The woman who had coveted my life, who had accepted my grandmother's jewelry from Thomas's hands, who had believed his lies about me and our marriage. Now, we shared something unexpected, the experience of being deceived by the same man, of having our finances and futures threatened by his schemes. As Rebecca had said days earlier, karma was coming for Thomas Blackwell. But what I hadn't anticipated was how quickly and thoroughly it would arrive, or that his mistress would become an unlikely ally in exposing the full extent of his deception. The chess pieces were moving rapidly now. Thomas in custody for contempt. His hidden financial records in the hands of forensic accountants. His mistress is apparently ready to turn against him. And me, the wife he had underestimated for 15 years, finally saw the complete picture of his betrayal and prepared to ensure he faced the full consequences of his actions. Tomorrow's meeting with Olivia would be another critical move in this high-stakes game, and for once, I was the one controlling the board. The cafe in Cambridge was tucked away on a quiet side street near Harvard University, its weathered brick exterior and understated signage making it easy to miss unless you knew what you were looking for. I'd chosen it precisely because it was unlikely to be frequented by anyone in Thomas's social or business circles. I arrived 20 minutes early, selecting a corner table with a clear view of both the entrance and the street outside. Jack was already positioned at a nearby table, appearing to be deeply engrossed in his laptop, but actually keeping careful watch over the surroundings. Testing, I murmured quietly, checking that the discreet recording device Jessica had provided was working properly. I'd decided to be transparent with Olivia about recording our conversation. Massachusetts law required consent from all parties anyway, but I wanted to ensure the technology was functioning before she arrived. At precisely noon, the cafe door opened, and I saw her in person for the first time. Olivia Prescott was even more striking than she had appeared in the photos. Tall and elegant in a simple black dress, her auburn hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She scanned the room with nervous energy until her gaze landed on me. A flash of recognition crossed her face, followed by something more complex. Embarrassment, perhaps, or apprehension. I stood as she approached my table, extending my hand in a businesslike gesture. "Olivia, thank you for coming." She hesitated before shaking my hand, her grip surprisingly firm despite her obvious discomfort. "Eleanor, thank you for agreeing to meet with me." She sat down across from me, her designer handbag placed carefully on the chair beside her. I couldn't help noticing it was the same brand Thomas had given me for our 10th anniversary, likely another gift purchased with misappropriated funds. "Before we begin," I said, "I want to be transparent with you. I'd like to record this conversation. With your permission, given the legal proceedings underway, having an accurate record protects both of us." Olivia looked surprised but nodded. "That's fair. Yes, you can record." I activated the recorder and placed it visibly on the table between us. "For the record, this is Eleanor Blackwell meeting with Olivia Prescott on October 15th, and Ms. Prescott has consented to this recording." An awkward silence fell between us. How does one begin a conversation with the woman who had been sleeping with your husband, wearing your jewelry, and planning to take over your life? Olivia broke the silence first. "I want you to know that when Thomas and I met, he told me he was essentially separated. That you lived separate lives. That the marriage existed on paper only." She twisted her hands nervously on the table. "I realize now that was likely a lie, like so many other things." "It was," I confirmed calmly. "Thomas and I weren't separated, even emotionally, as far as I knew. We had dinner together most nights, attended social events together, made future plans together. Until I received your email, I had no indication there were any significant problems in our marriage." She winced, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "That email, I shouldn't have sent it. It was cruel, and I'm sorry. Thomas convinced me it was the kindest way to let you know, that it would be easier than him having to tell you face to face. He said you were fragile, that you didn't handle emotional confrontation well." I almost laughed at the absurdity of Thomas's characterization. Fragile was never a word anyone would have used to describe me, except Thomas, apparently, when creating a fictional version of his wife to justify his affair. "Thomas told me many things about you," I said. "That you're a luxury real estate agent, that you met at a property showing, that you fell in love instantly and have been seeing each other for 8 months. Olivia nodded. "That part was true, at least. I showed him a penthouse in Tribeca. He said he was looking for investment properties for his firm. He was charming, knowledgeable. He asked me to dinner to discuss potential properties, and it evolved from there." She paused, pain evident in her expression. But so much else was lies. The successful business, the investment opportunities, the condo he supposedly bought for us. "And the money," I added gently. "Your inheritance." Her eyes welled with tears. $200,000. Everything my parents left me. He said. It was a guaranteed return, 15% within 6 months, completely secure. She laughed bitterly. "I'm supposed to be a professional, helping clients make sound real estate investments. And I fell for the oldest scam in the book because I was in love. Thomas is very convincing, I said, feeling an unexpected surge of compassion. I lived with him for 15 years and never saw through his deceptions. He built an entire false life that I believed completely. Until my email, she said quietly. Until your email, I confirmed. Which, in a strange way, might have saved me from something worse than heartbreak. The insurance policy Thomas took out on me had recently been increased to $7.5 million. Combined. With his offshore transfers and hidden surveillance, my attorneys and security consultant found the pattern concerning. Olivia paled visibly. You don't think he would have... that he was planning to... I shrugged, trying to appear more detached than I felt. I don't know what he was planning, but the timing is certainly suspicious. She reached for her water glass, with a shaking hand. I knew something was wrong when he started acting strangely last week. He became obsessed with checking his phone, would take calls in another room. I assumed he was seeing someone else. Ironic, right? Then after your call yesterday, when I confronted him about the condo and my inheritance, he completely transformed. Like a switch flipped. The charming, loving man disappeared. And suddenly there was this cold, angry stranger telling me I was being hysterical and needed to trust him. Classic Thomas, I observed. When charm doesn't work, he switches to intimidation. Did he threaten you? She hesitated, then nodded. Not explicitly. But he said I'd regret it if I spoke to you again or contacted authorities about the money. Then he took all the investment documents from my apartment and disappeared. I haven't heard from him since, except for one text last night saying everything was under control, and he'd explain soon. He was detained last night for contempt of court, I informed her. He violated a judge's order by attempting to remove or destroy financial records. Olivia's eyes widened. So he's in jail? Right now? Temporarily. He'll likely be released today, but it demonstrates how desperate he's becoming. Which is why I want to be direct with you, Olivia. I leaned forward, holding her gaze. I believe Thomas has defrauded multiple people beyond just you and me. I believe he was planning something potentially dangerous involving that insurance policy. And I believe you may be in possession of information that could help ensure he faces appropriate consequences for his actions. She bit her lip nervously. What kind of information? Communications about the investments. Details of how he approached you, what he promised, where he claimed the money was going. Documentation of the funds transfer. Anything he told you about other investors or business partnerships. And importantly, any information about his activities over the past several months that might shed light on his intentions regarding that insurance policy. You want me to testify against him, she said, not as a question but as a realization. I want the truth to come out, I clarified. For both our sakes. Your inheritance, my financial security, Thomas has put both at risk, and potentially worse. Olivia was quiet for a long moment, staring into her untouched tea. When she looked up, there was a new resolve in her expression. I have emails, text messages, investment documents he gave me before taking the originals, and recordings of some of our conversations. Recordings? I asked, surprised. She looked slightly embarrassed. It's a habit from my real estate work. I record property discussions with client permission to ensure I don't miss any details about their preferences. When Thomas started talking about these exclusive investment opportunities, I recorded our conversations to make sure I understood all the terms correctly. She gave a humorless laugh. I thought I was being a prudent investor. Turns out I was documenting fraud. This was potentially more valuable than I had hoped. Would you be willing to share these recordings with my legal team? They could be crucial evidence. Yes, she said firmly. I want my money back, and I want to make sure he can't do this to anyone else. She paused, conflict evident on her face. But I'm scared, Eleanor. You don't know what he's like when he's angry. Last night, when I confronted him about the condo, the look in his eyes. I do know, I corrected her gently. I saw that side of him for the first time in court yesterday. It's terrifying to realize the person you trusted is capable of that cold fury. I reached into my bag and pulled out a business card. This is Jack Foster, a private security consultant working with me. He can help ensure your safety while you're cooperating with the investigation. As if on cue, Jack glanced over from his table, giving a subtle nod to indicate he was aware of our conversation. Olivia took the card, studying it before slipping it into her purse. "There's something else you should know," she said, her voice dropping lower. "About 2 months ago, Thomas asked me detailed questions about my work with high-net-worth clients. Specifically, he wanted to know about clients who made cash purchases of luxury properties, who value privacy over price. At the time, I thought he was looking for investment opportunities, but now I wonder if he was planning some kind of exit strategy." This new information aligned with the offshore transfers Michael had uncovered. Thomas had been systematically preparing to disappear with the stolen funds, and possibly after collecting on my life insurance policy. "Did he mention specific countries or locations he was interested in?" I asked. "Belize came up several times," she recalled. "And Panama. He was particularly interested in countries with limited extradition agreements with the U.S. Another piece of the puzzle locked into place. The offshore accounts Michael had traced led to shell companies in both Belize and Panama. "Olivia, this information is extremely valuable," I said sincerely. "Would you be willing to provide a formal statement to my attorneys about these conversations?" She nodded, then hesitated. "Can I ask you something personal?" "You can ask." I reserve the right not to answer. "Did you really never suspect anything? In 15 years of marriage, were there no signs that Thomas wasn't who he claimed to be?" It was the question I'd been asking myself repeatedly since discovering the truth. "There were signs," I admitted. Comments about my little hospital job that I dismissed as harmless teasing. Financial discussions he would shut down by saying, "It was too complex for me to understand." His insistence on handling all our investments because I was too busy with my career. But I trusted him completely. That's what marriage is supposed to be, isn't it? Trust? "I thought so too," Olivia said softly. "I believed everything he told me about you, about himself, about our future together. I even believed him when he gave me this." She reached into her blouse and pulled out the sapphire pendant, my grandmother's pendant, that I'd seen her wearing in the photos. "He said it was a family heirloom from his side," she continued, unclasping it. "That his grandmother had worn it on her wedding day, and he wanted me to have it as a symbol of our future together." She held it out to me. "I'm sorry. I had no idea he'd taken it from you." I accepted the pendant, the familiar weight of it, in my palm, bringing back memories of my grandmother wearing it on special occasions. "Thank you," I said simply. Our conversation continued for another hour, with Olivia sharing more details about her relationship with Thomas, the investment scheme, and his increasing paranoia in recent weeks. She agreed to meet with Jessica the following day to provide a formal statement and turn over her evidence. As we prepared to leave, Olivia asked one final question. "What happens now? To Thomas, I mean." "That depends partly on what your evidence reveals," I explained. "Currently, he's facing civil charges related to the divorce, financial misconduct, asset concealment, potential insurance fraud. But if there's evidence of a broader investment scheme targeting multiple victims, he could face criminal charges as well." She nodded, absorbing this. "And the money? My inheritance?" "My forensic accountant is tracing all the transfers. If the money can be recovered from the offshore accounts, you should be able to reclaim it. If not..." I hesitated, not wanting to crush her hope. "We'll be in the same position, pursuing Thomas's remaining assets to recover what we can." We walked out of the cafe together, an unlikely pair united by the man who had betrayed us both. Jack followed at a discreet distance, ensuring our safety. I really believed I was the lucky one, Olivia said suddenly as we reached the street. Getting the successful, charming man while you were left behind. I envied your life so much based on Thomas's descriptions. The beautiful home, the luxury vacations, the financial security. I thought I was trading up from my cramped apartment and commission to commission existence. She laughed without humor. Instead, I was being groomed as the next victim in his scheme. And I envied your youth and freedom, I admitted. When I saw those photos of you with Thomas, my first thought wasn't even about the betrayal. It was wondering what you had that I lacked. Why would he choose you over me after 15 years? He chose neither of us, Olivia said thoughtfully. He chose himself. We were just assets to be used and discarded when convenient. Her insight was surprisingly perceptive. Thomas hadn't truly chosen either of us. We were simply convenient vessels for his schemes, sources of money, status, and potential insurance payouts. We parted with an awkward handshake that transformed midway into a brief hug, a moment of solidarity between two women who had been manipulated by the same man. As Jack drove me back to Rebecca's house, I reviewed the recording of our conversation, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. Relief at recovering my grandmother's pendant. Validation hearing Olivia confirm Thomas's manipulative behaviors. Sadness for both of us, having invested so much, emotionally and financially, in a man who saw us only as means to an end. But overriding these emotions was a growing sense of resolve. With Olivia's evidence added to what we'd already gathered, Thomas's carefully constructed facade was crumbling completely. The man who had spent years making me doubt my financial acumen, who had dismissed my career while secretly stealing from me, who had potentially been planning something unthinkable involving that insurance policy, that man would finally face the consequences of his actions. When I arrived at Rebecca's house, I found her on the patio with Michael Chen, surrounded by documents and laptops. Perfect timing, she called as I approached. Michael has made some significant discoveries in the records seized from Thomas's office. More than significant, Michael corrected, his typically calm demeanor showing unusual excitement. Eleanor, the documents confirm our suspicions about a wider investment scheme. Thomas wasn't just defrauding you and Olivia. He was running a full-scale Ponzi scheme targeting wealthy individuals, primarily women, through his investment firm. He turned his laptop to show me a spreadsheet with dozens of names, investment amounts, and dates. These are his victims over the past 3 years, combined losses totaling nearly $4.8 million. Thus, he would use new investments to pay returns to the earlier investors, creating the illusion of successful ventures while pocketing a significant portion and transferring it offshore. And there's more, Rebecca added. Tell her about the life insurance angle. Michael's expression turned grave. We found documentation of 3 previous cases where Thomas established relationships with wealthy women, obtained life insurance, policies on them, and then, well, 2 of the women died under circumstances that were ruled accidental. The 3rd survived what was deemed a home invasion gone wrong. The implication sent a chill through me. Are you saying Thomas was potentially involved in— We can't make that accusation without evidence, Michael interrupted cautiously. But the pattern is extremely concerning. In each case, Thomas collected substantial insurance payouts and disappeared from the women's social circles shortly afterward. No direct connection was ever established between him and the incidents. We've shared this information with Jessica, Rebecca explained. She's contacting the authorities. This goes well beyond divorce proceedings now, Eleanor. Thomas may be facing serious criminal charges. I sank into a chair, trying to process the enormity of what they were suggesting. Had I been unknowingly living with a man capable of not just fraud, but potentially worse? Had I narrowly escaped, becoming his next insurance payout? There's one more thing, Michael said, his voice gentler now. We found documentation of an appointment Thomas had scheduled for next week with a property manager in Belize. First-class tickets were purchased in his name only. It appears he was planning to leave the country. The timeline suddenly crystallized in my mind. Thomas's trips to New York with Olivia, the increased surveillance in our home, the life insurance, policy increase, the offshore transfers, the planned departure to Belize, all while maintaining the facade of normal married life with me. He was never planning to leave me for Olivia, I realized aloud. He was setting up his exit strategy after... I couldn't finish the sentence. Rebecca reached over to squeeze my hand. But he didn't succeed. You discovered the truth in time. Eleanor, you're safe. And now, with this evidence, he won't be able to hurt anyone else. As the implications sank in, my phone buzzed with a message from Jessica. Thomas released on bail with electronic monitoring. Court has restricted him to his attorney's office or approved residence only. We have an emergency hearing scheduled. Tomorrow regarding new evidence. Call me ASAP. I showed the message to Rebecca and Michael. He's out. But monitored and restricted, Rebecca reminded me. And with what we've discovered, plus Olivia's evidence, he won't remain free for long. I nodded, trying to take comfort in that certainty. The man I had married, or rather, the man I thought I had married, would soon face justice not just for his betrayal of me, but for a pattern of deception and potential crimes spanning years and affecting multiple victims. The strategic planning phase was coming to fruition. With each piece of evidence, each new ally, the noose was tightening around Thomas Blackwell. And I was no longer just fighting for my financial security or dignity. I was potentially stopping a dangerous predator from claiming more victims. Tomorrow's emergency hearing would be the next critical step in this process. As Rebecca, Michael, and I prepared the new evidence for Jessica, I felt a strange sense of purpose replacing the shock and betrayal that had dominated the past week. This wasn't just about my divorce anymore. It was about justice for everyone Thomas had harmed, and protection for those he might have targeted next, including, quite possibly, Olivia, the woman who had once envied my life so much she'd been willing to help destroy it, only to discover she'd narrowly escaped becoming Thomas's next victim. The Boston skyline glittered in the autumn sunset as I stood on the balcony of my new apartment in Back Bay. The leaves in the public garden were just beginning to turn, painting the landscape in vibrant reds and golds. Fall had always been my favorite season, but this year it carried special significance. It marked 1 year since my life had been completely transformed. The doorbell rang, interrupting my reflections. I smiled as I went to answer it, already knowing who it would be. Right on time, I greeted Rebecca, who stood in the hallway holding a bottle of champagne. Would I miss our 1-year freedom celebration? She asked, stepping inside and giving me a warm hug. Besides, I come bearing news as well as bubbly. Good news, I hope. Rebecca's smile widened. The best. But let's wait for the others before I spill it. Within 20 minutes, my apartment was filled with the small circle of people who had become my support system and, in many ways, my salvation over the past year. Jessica arrived with a beautifully wrapped gift box. Michael Chen came with his wife, Laura, whom I'd grown close to during the long process of untangling Thomas's financial web. Jack Foster brought gourmet cupcakes from my favorite bakery. And finally, somewhat surprisingly, Olivia Prescott arrived, looking more relaxed and confident than she had in our early encounters. Once everyone had gathered in the living room with glasses of champagne, Rebecca clinked her spoon against her glass for attention. Before we start our formal celebration of Eleanor's year of freedom, I have an announcement. She paused dramatically. I just got word from my contact at the U.S. Attorney's Office. Thomas's plea deal has been finalized. 20 years, no possibility of parole for at least 15, and full restitution to all identified victims. A cheer went up around the room. It had been a long road to this moment. Countless hearings, mountains of evidence, the emergence of more victims, and the slow grinding of the justice system. But finally, Thomas Blackwell was facing the consequences of his actions. That's not all, Jessica added, setting down her glass. The investigation into the suspicious deaths of Thomas's previous associates has been reopened based on the evidence we uncovered. The detectives believe they may have enough to bring additional charges, possibly even murder charges in at least one of the cases. The room sobered slightly at this reminder of how close I might have come to a similar fate. Had Olivia not sent that email when she did? Had I not discovered Thomas's deception when I did? Who knows what might have happened during his planned trip to Belize? To Eleanor, Jack raised his glass, who not only escaped a dangerous situation, but helped ensure Thomas Blackwell will never harm another person. And to all of you, I countered, raising my own glass, without whom I might never have discovered the truth, protected myself, or found the strength to fight back. As everyone clinked glasses, I caught Olivia's eye across the room. Our unlikely alliance had evolved into something resembling friendship over the past year. After providing crucial evidence against Thomas, she had slowly rebuilt her life, recovering most of her inheritance through the victim restitution process and returning to her real estate career with a new specialization in helping women achieve financial independence through property investment. "Have you seen the townhouse?" she asked quietly as she joined me by the window a little later. I shook my head. Not since I moved out last year. Jessica handled everything through the asset liquidation. Why? "I showed it last week," Olivia explained. "It's finally going on the market after all the legal complications were resolved. It's different without all of Thomas's pretentious furnishings. Smaller somehow, but lighter. I could imagine it. The heavy masculine furniture gone, the dark, drapes removed, the space ready for someone new to build a life there. A life hopefully built on truth rather than deception." "Are you sorry you never got to live there?" I asked, genuinely curious. "It was the life you thought you wanted." Olivia smiled wryly. "Sometimes I think about the woman I was a year ago, so desperate to have what I thought was your perfect life that I was willing to help destroy it. She seems like a stranger now." She swirled her champagne thoughtfully. "I'm not sorry. That house, that life, it was all built on lies. I'm building something real now, something that's actually mine." Her words resonated deeply with me. I, too, was building something real after years of living in an elaborate illusion. The gathering continued with dinner, more champagne, and increasingly animated conversations as the evening progressed. It wasn't just a celebration of Thomas's sentencing. It was a celebration of survival, renewal, and unexpected bonds forged through adversity. As my guests mingled, I found myself in the kitchen with Jessica, who was helping me plate dessert. "Have you opened the gift yet?" she asked, nodding toward the elegantly wrapped box she'd brought. "I was waiting for the right moment," I admitted. "This is it," she said, handing me the package. "It's not just from me, it's from all of us." Curious, I untied the silver ribbon and carefully removed the wrapping paper. Inside was a beautiful wooden box with my initials engraved on the top. I opened it to find a collection of newspaper clippings, court documents, and photographs. The chronicle of Thomas's downfall and my rebuilding. "We thought you should have the complete record," Jessica explained. "Not to dwell on the past, but to remind yourself of how far you've come. The final document was just added this morning." I lifted out the most recent edition, the official sentencing document for Thomas Blackwell, convicted of multiple counts of wire fraud, investment fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. 20 years in federal prison, restitution in the amount of $5.2 million to his victims, all his remaining assets seized and liquidated. "It's really over," I whispered, tracing my finger over the official seal. "One chapter is," Jessica agreed, "but your story is just beginning. Which reminds me..." She pulled an envelope from her jacket pocket. "The publisher's final offer came in today. They're very excited about your book." The book had been Rebecca's idea initially, a memoir about financial deception in relationships and how to protect yourself, based on my experience with Thomas. What had started as a therapeutic exercise had evolved into a promising project with significant publisher interest. 3-book deal, Jessica continued, handing me the envelope. This one, plus a financial empowerment guide for women and a 3rd book of your choice. The advance is substantial. I opened the envelope and nearly dropped it when I saw the figure. It was more than enough to complete the financial rebuilding I'd been working on for the past year. They're also interested in having Olivia contribute a section from the perspective of the other woman, who was similarly deceived, Jessica added. If you're both comfortable with that collaboration. I glanced across the room at Olivia, who was engaged in an animated conversation with Michael about real estate investment strategies. Our paths had converged in the most unlikely way, but there was something poetically just about us now working together to help other women avoid similar situations. I think that could be powerful, I agreed. 2 perspectives on the same deception. As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, Jack pulled me aside for a brief word. I have a final report for you, he said quietly. Security monitoring has confirmed no unusual activity around either your residence or workplace for the past 6 months. Thomas's known associates have all distanced themselves, and there's been no communication from him attempting to reach you through third parties. I nodded, relieved but not surprised. Thomas had bigger problems now than trying to reestablish contact with me. My professional recommendation is that we can scale back security measures to normal levels, Jack continued, but I'm always available if you ever have concerns. Thank you, Jack, for everything. I meant it sincerely. His vigilance during those terrifying early days had provided not just safety, but peace of mind. After the last guest had departed, I returned to the balcony with a final glass of champagne. The city lights now dominated the darkened skyline, thousands of windows illuminated in the night. Behind each one, lives being lived, stories unfolding, some joyful, some painful, all complex. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Curious, I opened it. Saw the news about TB's sentencing. Thought of you. Hope you're well. Naomi Prescott, Olivia's sister, whose initial call had provided crucial information about Thomas's investment scheme targeting Olivia. I smiled and texted, back a simple, thank you, I am. Looking out over the city, I reflected on how thoroughly my life had changed in a single year. The divorce had been finalized months ago, with the judge granting me not just freedom from Thomas, but significant compensation from the assets that could be recovered. The townhouse, once liquidated, had provided enough to secure this smaller, but wonderfully peaceful apartment. My career at the hospital had flourished, with a promotion to Chief Development Officer recognizing my expanded vision for healthcare philanthropy. But the most profound changes weren't financial or professional. They were internal. The woman who had trusted blindly, who had deferred to her husband's financial expertise while dismissing her own capabilities, who had accepted subtle undermining and gaslighting as normal aspects of marriage, that woman was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, more discerning, and unapologetically independent. I thought about Olivia's words earlier in the evening, about building something real. That's exactly what I had been doing this past year, constructing a genuine life on a foundation of truth rather than illusion. The irony wasn't lost on me. Thomas and Olivia had conspired to take my life from me, thinking it was something enviable and perfect. Instead, their actions had freed me from a life that was neither, allowing me to create something far better. My grandmother's sapphire pendant caught the moonlight as I absent-mindedly touched it around my neck. I'd had it reset in a new setting, transforming it from a painful reminder into a symbol of resilience and renewal. Like the pendant, I too had been reset, still essentially myself, but placed in a new setting that better showcased my true value. 6 months later, The bookstore was packed beyond capacity, with people standing in the aisles and spilling out into the adjacent cafe area. I sat at the signing table, still somewhat in disbelief at the turnout for my book launch. His Lies, Her Life, How I Discovered My Husband's Deception and Reclaimed My Future, had hit the bestseller lists in its first week of release. The publisher attributed its success to the timeliness of the subject matter, financial abuse and deception in relationships, but I knew it was also the compelling narrative of transformation that resonated with readers. Beside me sat Olivia, whose contribution to the book had expanded from a single chapter to a substantial section titled, The Other Side, How I Was Manipulated into Becoming the Other Woman. Our joint media appearances had generated significant attention, with many commentators noting the unusualness of the betrayed wife and the mistress collaborating to expose the true villain in their story. "Next, please," the bookstore manager called, ushering forward a woman in her early 40s, clutching a copy of the book so tightly her knuckles were white. "Thank you for writing this," she said as I signed her copy. "I'm going through something similar right now, not as dramatic as your situation, but the financial deception, the gaslighting, it's all there. Your book gave me the courage to consult an attorney and secure my own accounts." I heard variations of this same message throughout the evening. Women, and some men, who recognized patterns from their own relationships in the pages of my book and found the strength to take protective action. This was exactly why I had decided to share my story publicly, despite the inevitable media sensationalism around Thomas's crimes. After the signing, Olivia and I joined Rebecca, Jessica, and Michael for a quiet celebration dinner at an upscale restaurant near the bookstore. "The victim support group has expanded to 3 more cities," Jessica reported as we enjoyed our appetizers. "Your book is being used as a resource in their financial literacy workshops. And the Hospital Foundation's Women's Financial Independence project has secured funding for another 3 years," Rebecca added. "The board specifically cited your leadership as the reason for their continued support. The project had been my brainchild, using my position at the hospital to create educational resources for women patients, particularly those showing signs of being in financially controlling relationships. Medical settings were often one of the few places such women could speak freely, away from controlling partners, making hospitals ideal venues for intervention." "What about the insurance investigation?" I asked Michael, referring to the ongoing examination of the suspicious deaths of Thomas's previous associates. He shook his head. "Still proceeding, but slowly. The evidence is largely circumstantial, though compelling in aggregate. The prosecutors are being very methodical. They don't want to risk a failed case that might impact his current sentence." I nodded, understanding the caution. Thomas was already serving 20 years. Additional charges would be about justice for those women and their families rather than extending his incarceration. "Have you decided about the interview request?" Olivia asked, referring to a major network's proposal for a primetime special about the case. "I'm leaning toward doing it," I admitted. "Not for the publicity, but because it would reach an even wider audience who might recognize these patterns in their own relationships." The waiter arrived with our main courses, temporarily, pausing the conversation. As we ate, I marveled at the unlikely assembly around the table: my divorce attorney, my forensic accountant, my best friend, and my husband's former mistress, all now integral parts of my life's new chapter. I received an interesting letter. "Yesterday," I said as we finished our meals. "From Thomas." The table fell silent, all eyes turning to me with concern. "It was reviewed by prison authorities, of course," I quickly assured them. "And I had Jack check it for any hidden messages or threats. It was surprisingly straightforward." "What did it say?" Rebecca asked, her voice tense. "He apologized. Said he's in therapy in prison, coming to terms with his patterns of deception and exploitation. He claimed he never intended physical harm to come to me, that the insurance policy was just another financial scheme." I shrugged. Whether that's true or just another manipulation, I'll never know. Did you respond? Jessica asked. I shook my head. I don't need to. That chapter of my life is closed. And it truly was. Thomas Blackwell, once the center of my existence, had become a footnote in my story rather than its defining feature. The pain and betrayal had transformed into purpose and strength. The financial devastation had led to new expertise and independence. As we finished our dinner and prepared to leave, Olivia raised her glass for a final toast. To let them have the debts, the lies, and everything they were hiding, she said with a smile, echoing the title of the speaking tour we were about to embark on together. And to keep what truly matters, I added, clinking my glass against hers. Our dignity, our truth, and our future. Outside the restaurant, the summer evening was warm and inviting. As I hailed a taxi to take me home, I thought about the strange, twisting path that had led me here. How my husband's betrayal with the woman who had envied my life had ultimately freed both of us from his deception. How the life Thomas and Olivia had coveted, the elegant townhouse, the social status, the apparent financial success, had been nothing but an elaborate facade concealing debt, lies, and potential danger. They had wanted my life, so I had let them have the illusion while I claimed the reality: financial independence, genuine relationships, meaningful work, and the profound peace that comes from living authentically. As the taxi pulled away, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window, smiling, confident, unburdened, the woman Thomas had underestimated. The woman who had turned betrayal into triumph. The woman who had let her husband's mistress have the debts, the lies, and everything he was hiding, and kept everything that truly mattered for herself. Looking for more? We've got two amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.